Hello, and welcome to Pop-O-Holics, Episode 4, Batman, Damned Through All These Years. This is a real fun one. Chris, Brian, and I talk about one of our favorite superheroes ever, the Batman, the Cape Crusader, the Dark Knight. We're talking his inception. Early 1900s he's been around, in comic books, film, TV shows, and video games. And we're going to talk about what he's reflected in the culture and what we want in Batman and what makes Batman such an interesting character. We then focus on the newest comic in Batman's long, storied career, and it's Batman the Damned, part of the new Black Label by DC Comics to separate these characters from their conventional continuity and introduce some really crazy stuff. We spent most of this part trying to figure out what the hell this comic's about. It's very interesting, and we're glad you're going to join us. Enjoy the show. Pop-O-Holics.
We're going to be hugging it.
Hugging and chugging it.
Hugging it. Only one of us is going to be chugging it.
I wish you told us.
Oh, we should have celebrated with a drink cast. Go make a drink, boys.
Yeah, I don't have much here right now,
Go grab a cocktail.
I'm going to have to pee every 3 minutes if I do that.
Yeah, that's true. We don't want that.
These are the harsh facts.
We'll have to record from the bathroom if we
Dude,
ever
if
do an
you're
episode.
sitting on top of a bucket or something, just flip the bucket and just pull your pants down.
I do have a bucket in here, to be honest. This is, it's got baseballs in it, but...
It might not be very comfortable, but at least you just let it flow whenever you want.
So
It doesn't interrupt the recording.
Today is September 30th, and today is my last day of Sober September, which, of course, I end by drinking. So it's...
So you never quite make it the full month.
I never make it on purpose because I'm in control of my destiny, and that is the thesis of Sober September.
Yeah.
It's a second to reflect, see what my relationship with alcohol is like. And it always reminds me that it's healthy and that I can drink in moderation and I don't need it and don't need to medicate myself. But at the end of the day, it's my rules, bitches. So if I want to drink, I drink.
To be totally honest, I think your relationship with LaCroix is more unhealthy than your relationship with alcohol. I had a LaCroix the other day. It was awful.
Oh, you're so wrong.
It was like a half-hour nightmare.
You're so
That's
wrong.
how long it took me to drink it.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I do Sober September every September or by September. If I have something going on in September, like a wedding or something where I have to drink, I decide for myself that I take 1 month not to drink. And this September, I did wait till September to do it. And I celebrate by right before I'm about to finish no drinking, I have a drink and mess it all up.
You proved a point.
Yeah,
It's fine.
So how are you guys doing? How's your Sunday nights going? It is Sunday night when we're recording.
It's going well. I did a lot of domestic things this weekend. I went garage sailing with my wife and father-in-law.
What's garage sailing?
Dude, it's when you go to a bunch of garage sales.
Wouldn't that be garage
on
buying?
a sunny Saturday?
Garage
It's like
sailing.
a pontoon boat, but it's a garage.
It's
That's why
garage
you
sailing.
just,
Yeah, it's where you get a big boat and everybody gets on it.
It's
put
that
a
big
couple cars in there.
It's that big like massive land that's like formed from like garbage outside New York.
Yeah,
This garage. Oh, that's
Like-
garbage sailing, not garage.
garbage sailing.
I was trying to come up with some clever thing. Not
There's a lot of garbage in garages.
well, yeah. That's at least my experience with garages. Ooh, we are gonna edit that out. That is going out of the pod. Me mistaking garage for garbage. Guys, I'm only one cocktail in. And my tolerance has reset. So this might be a little sloppy.
How was your weekend, Brian?
Yeah, Brian.
My weekend was pretty great. I will say the Bucks game was, as can be kind of expected from the Bucks, horrible. They got slaughtered by the Bears.
But just enough
It
hope.
was still enjoyable to watch.
And
though.
just enough hope that you think there's a chance, but there's no chance.
There's moments of like, oh, here's the turnaround, and then there's,
an interception.
an interception. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I don't even watch
That's
the
awful.
Bucks anymore, and I know their MO.
But yeah, weekend was good.
That's cool. You still have season tickets to go see the Bucks, or just see the off-handed one every once in a while?
Well, my parents have two
Nice,
season
yeah.
tickets. They do, yeah.
Yeah, that's what sucks about, I'm so happy that my dad is retired, but through his company, he would have like season passes he shared with his like management team to like go see the Bucks and Lightning. And I'm not even a huge sports guy, but my family loves it. So it was
That's still fun.
Yeah, if you Chris,
sure.
I know you're not a huge sporting affairs lover.
I'm not into the sporting affairs.
But I will say, and this is a recommendation for anybody, if there's any live sports around you, go. The more amateur, the better. I've been really trying to get out to like Solar Bears game, but the more that it's like people that aren't good at the game, and maybe there's like one or two good people on each team, honestly, the better it is. It's seriously great. That's why I prefer watching like college or high school basketball over.
Because they don't
And
know
also-
what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, and the tickets are way cheaper. There's a deal down here by us in Clearwater, the Threshers, the minor league baseball team. They do Dollar Tuesdays, where it's dollar entry, dollar beers, and dollar hot dogs.
Dollar
And
dogs.
It's hard to go wrong with dollar beers, dollar dogs.
True.
Yeah,
Regardless
guys.
what you're watching.
What you go to see a live entertainment, and then you can have 6 beers, 6 hot dogs, and you spend
For under
14
$20.
Yeah. It doesn't get any better than that. I had a vegan.
That actually sounds pretty great.
So, Overrated Records, in partnership with Overrated Records, and Kyle Hoffer, who's part of that, put on a Pulp Music Festival yesterday. That is an event we do every year, and it's an annual music festival. Saw a lot of great local live bands. It was awesome, and we had food there, and it was a vegan hot dog, and it's all that I had to eat. And I'm pretty sure it was just like bloated soy air, but it was
Sounds
delicious.
Delicious.
Dude, it was and it was like an Italian sausage with like hot sauce and like this spicy barbecue. That's
You
what
gotta
Wow.
give me that brand. What?
Yeah, it's a vegan hot dog cart. They do it around here in Orlando. It's now the guy now has like a couple people, but yeah, they were there.
Oh,
It was
okay.
delicious. Anyway, but the festival went really good.
Sweet.
Did you happen to perform?
No, my band did not perform last night, but we want to. We got some plans coming up. We might incorporate some podcast stuff next year. That's kind of that's the goal. Have a little podcast room where all the nerds hang out. But we'll
Cool.
see. More to come. More
Sounds
to
great.
come. Anyway, so that's a lot of that's the most rambling we've done, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if this is your first episode, we normally make it to the point a little quicker. Actually, we don't. We kind of meander for a long time before we get to the point. But today we're talking about the latest release in the DC comic Batman and the several iterations that happen. But this is the latest, and this is kind of in their new Black Label branding, which is kind of outside continuity, outside universe, where they're going to have a bunch of artists and writers take on basically, Chris, you can probably speak to this better, but take on these big properties and have huge liberties with who they can interact with and
Right.
make interesting stories.
Right. The Black Label's a way for basically top tier comic book writers and artists to have their way with these different characters. And there's no type of set schedule. So they can really take their time fleshing out the narratives that they want to tell and the artwork that they want to show.
Yeah, and it's a really cool idea, and I think a cool, interesting way to let good writers have fun. And we're going to talk about that more. We're going to get into our thoughts on Black Label, the Batman Damned series. The first issue was released a couple weeks ago, and the next one's coming out in November. And so we wanted to speak on this iteration of Batman, but we're using this as a general template to talk about Batman through the years and his history. So we're going to start off with some history on Batman. And we're going to talk about our personal relationship with the character and how we know him and what he means to us and what the writers have done with him. We're going to talk about the different generations of Batman, cinematic interpretations, comic books, video games, even maybe a little music. And then we're going to get into what we think of Batman now in this really fun iteration that he's in Batman the Damned. So to kick it off, let's talk about how Batman makes us feel, what we know about Batman, what our lives have been personally affected by this iconic character.
Brian, you want to kick it off?
Oh, Brian's
You want me to kick it off?
I'll kick it off since you're going to dive deep on the history for us, the fact
Okay,
man
cool.
for this episode. So my introduction to Batman was largely the Tim Burton movies. I probably watched them debatably, looking back, maybe debatably too young, but I feel like they are pretty kid friendly in terms of violence and things like that. But Yeah, I watched all the Batmans, from Batman to Batman Returns, both Burton ones, and then Batman Forever, and even Batman and Robin. And since I
Ugh.
was watching, yeah, I know. When I watched it, I enjoyed it though. Looking back, I haven't watched it since I was probably whenever it came out. That was 97 or so.
I think it was
maybe a little
98.
98. Okay, so
1998.
I probably watched
Let me
it
check while you're talking.
a
Guys,
few
just
years
to
after that.
clarify, Batman and Robin still very much enjoyable.
Is
Maybe
it?
not a good. Yeah, it's entertaining. It's so silly. It's the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right?
You're right, 1997.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't get any. The amount of free. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger is playing Mr. Freeze, and all of his lines are freeze puns. It's like a Robot Chicken episode. If you just watch it like that, it's silly. It's,
Nice to see you.
yeah, I think
Oh,
it's genius.
man.
I think it's genius. Anyway,
Genius may be a step too far, but I bet I can appreciate it. I got to come back to it. But
I didn't.
Yeah,
Last
that
time
was
I watched it, I did not turn it off.
okay. That says something considering your opinions on 2001. Subtle jabs here. No, but I grew up watching these movies. I probably saw them when I was around 10 to 12, I imagine, and loved the character. I actually never got into the animated series until relatively recently, and I've been enjoying trying to dig into that a bit,
So good.
which is very much a kids show. But yeah, I think there's some pretty heavy themes, and I think it's a character that in all the iterations I've seen him in have really been meaningful to the time in which they were made and to the culture around them. So, what about you guys?
My first exposure was Batman the Animated Series when I was a kid, so probably like 5 years old, I would say. I remember watching it in our den, probably when I wasn't supposed to be watching it, because in hindsight, like 5 was probably a little young to be watching that. I don't know. My wife says we're not allowed to show our kids that show until they're like 11 or 12. But I mean, it was the 90s, whatever.
A lot
Everything
of
flew back
growing
then.
up happened in that den.
Yeah. But yeah, I probably just like caught it randomly on TV and it kind of stuck. And granted, at 5 years old, you don't really catch like the narrative of each of those episodes. But you're like, hey, that's Batman and that's Robin, and that's really cool. His logo on his chest is really what like penetrates like your brain. It's so iconic that bat symbol just like goes through everything else. So that's probably what I was drawn to as a kid. I saw the symbol and I was like, hey, that's Batman. But
Yes,
yeah, from
iconography,
there,
which may
Yeah.
come up later.
it probably will, definitely. Yeah, that was my first exposure to the character. And I was in love ever since. A couple weeks ago, we had a guest on, Marcus, who was talking about how Spider-Man was like his moral compass for life. Kind of like his religion. What would Spider-Man do? That's Batman for me. Like whenever I was in any type of situation, I didn't really know how to react morally. It's like, what would Batman do in this situation? So he's
I accidentally spilled some wine. I accidentally spilled some juice on the table in the restaurant. What would Batman do? I'm going to buy the restaurant.
yeah. That's what Bruce Wayne would do.
So Bruce, yeah, sure. That is very
Got to
true.
distinguish.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty much within the same late 20s, early 30s age bracket. So Burton Batman definitely watched as a kid, and looking back, that was kind of the most serious besides Batman Forever, which was the one after that, right? Fact guy, the one with
Batman
Penguin.
Returns after that.
Batman
It was
Returns.
Batman
That's
Returns
what
after
I'm
the
thinking. Yes,
Yeah.
Batman Returns, the one with Penguin. Those
So-
were actually, looking in hindsight, they're a little campy, but they really were more serious than what we got with Schumacher in the later series. So those were a little serious, and so was the animated series for me. I always remember liking it, but like you were saying, not really catching on to the narrative because he was a darker character even in the animated series.
Yeah.
But I don't think Batman does anything morally egregious. I think
No.
kids can watch it, and it's not
No,
even that.
definitely not.
I guess he kind of punches people. But he's not like hanging him upside down and like torturing them. Like interrogation, I think, is tying up and just scaring people, right? Most of it's the He's scaring criminals. He's
until Chris Nolan and some of the darker comic runs.
But he was always kind of a fun character, and I remember as a kid, I will totally own up to like loving the Schumacher films. Like I loved them as a kid. They were fun, and there's bright colored outfits, and it's really campy. And
they're meant to be for. I think those films in particular are meant to be for kids. You know, like Schumacher was really channeling the Adam West television show when he was making those. It's all pure camp.
I mean, you've got in those later movies, you got Uma Thurman.
Yeah,
you got
Poison
Jim
Ivy.
Carrey.
Oh, that's right.
You know, you got a lot of really fun actors in it.
You got a awful portrayal of Bane.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's like
Bane is way smarter in the comic books than they made him out to be in that movie.
And I think that's what you start to realize when you get something like The Turn. You know, for me, we're going to talk about the Dark Knight series, but Batman Begins and The Dark Knight is that kind of serious turn, that kind of 80s turn that happened culturally with Batman, that brought him to the film with that kind of more serious tone. That was like kind of the turn, I think, in the early 2000s. So let's talk about the history of Batman. Batman started off in a Detective comic series. Chris, tell us more.
Detective Comics number 27.
The Batman, which I thought was really funny that he's referred to as the Batman in that comic book.
So I'm just realizing this. Does DC come from Detective Comics?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. That's I guess that's painfully obvious. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Batman first appeared in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939.
I thought it stood for dark characters.
39. Okay.
They were actually pretty dark when the comics first started. They were more along the lines of the darker tone stuff that Batman has done. Granted, it was the 1930s and 40s, so like how dark were you really getting? But 1939, co-created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. And the reason why I want to kind of put a pin in that is, are you guys familiar with Bill Finger?
No, I'm not.
I am not.
So Bill Finger never received credit for creating Batman while he was alive.
Oh, wow.
Bob Kane basically stole all of his ideas and took all the credit for the creation of Batman. Like, there would be no Batman as we know him without the work that Bill Finger contributed to that series. Like, he was responsible for making his suit black. Like, oops, I just hit the desk. Anyway, he was responsible for making his suit black. Bob Kane's original suit was like a bright red, and he had like bat wings and then a domino mask instead of the cowl. So Bill Finger was also responsible for that cowl iconography as well. A lot of the early stories, he helped Jerry Robinson create the Joker. So like the Batman that you guys know would not exist without Bill Finger's work. But the sad thing is he never got any credit for it while he was alive. So he died like poor and alone, which is awful. And
that is awful. Christian, you got to pour one out for Finger.
I'm going to pour one out right into my gullet.
Just don't put it on the computer.
Yeah,
I appreciate you bringing that up, though. I'm surprised I haven't heard of that before. Bob Kane is like the classic, like Batman, Bob Kane.
There's a really interesting documentary on Hulu if you guys want to learn more about it. I think it's, what was it called? I watched it a couple years ago. It was like Batman and Bill or something like that. I'll look it up.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy, and you hear, he came in early Detective Comics, and I always knew that, but looking up the information, at 1939, this character's older than Captain America, Spider-Man. Yeah. I mean, this character is pre-World War, well, like during World War
in the middle of it.
In the middle of it.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts, right? He's been around for over 75 years.
Such staying power.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, why he might have such staying power, So
through the 30s and the 40s, he was getting a lot more comics issued on him. He was becoming a really popular character, and we actually get a lot of the bad guys that we still know, and a lot of the villains that are still in the Rogues Gallery. We got the Joker, pre-50s.
Yeah.
Do you know much about the early iterations of the Joker?
So by no means am I a Batman historian. I just want to put that out there right now, but I am a huge fan. And as the early Joker, he was more like the gangster and psychopath that we know him as today. But Batman has had peaks and valleys when it comes to tonality, like how dark he is versus how campy he is.
Sure.
So that took a huge shift in the 1950s and 1960s, and he became more of like a slapstick, kind of like Cesar Romero in the 1966 Adam West Batman TV show. The comics kind of began to align themselves with that type of tone, right?
Right. Do you think that's, just speculation? Nothing to back me up. Any feedback or criticisms, please email us at popoholicscast@gmail.com. But it seems to me that, the Batman TV series, which I know we're skipping ahead a bit, we'll backtrack on some stuff. But the Batman TV series seems like a bunch of people that are working for a network. They're like, these comic books for kids, we're going to let's
totally
make it fun. And
the
adults can have some fun. And then we'll have some poop jokes and some whoopee jokes,
What's going to sell? What's going to sell to those kids?
And it was
fun
really
Batman.
But, okay, so we get the, going through the 50s, we get Batwoman. We get a female sidekick
added. Yep. So the publishers thought that the dynamic duo was a little too homoerotic. So they wanted to insert some females into the comic, and that's
that
what
really
ended
was
up.
the driving force.
Yeah, that was the driving force behind it. Yep.
Wow.
Isn't that messed up?
Oh, interesting.
So that led to Batwoman and Batgirl, and to make the comic a little more family friendly as well, we also got Ace, the Bat Hound, which I know you.
So you're telling me we
don't
had to
know much
become a
about.
little homophobic to lead to women empowerment. It's interesting.
I'm. If that's how you want to phrase it, dude.
Does the ends justify the means?
Yeah.
So tell us more about Ace the Bat Hound. I'm very curious. I don't know anything about Ace the Bat Hound.
So you guys don't know. Okay. Are you familiar with Crypto, the super dog?
Yes.
Crypto I'm familiar with,
Superman's pet dog.
Right. So the easiest way to think about Ace the Bat Hound is he's literally just Batman and Robin's dog.
I can
Does
imagine.
he also
it.
fight crime?
I wasn't having trouble.
He does. He's not like a Scooby-Doo. Like he doesn't talk like or anything like that. So don't think about it. He's literally just a dog with a cow to protect his identity. Do some research. Do some research on Wikipedia. The story. I'm not like 100% on the story, but there's a very grounded reason why Batman puts a cow on that dog.
It's because he's a billionaire dog. His dad were some famous puppy mill execs, and he's the son of that empire. So,
dude,
Ace the Bat Hound has to protect.
And you joke, but Ace is one of those characters that has actually continued on through the Batman mythos up until this point. Like, I don't know if either of you have ever watched Batman Beyond, but in Batman Beyond, Ace is a character in that show. He's like the Black Great Dane in that show. He doesn't wear a cowl, but his name is Ace. So it's like a nod to that.
What's his alter ego?
Ace.
Is it Bow Wolf?
Bruce Wayne's dog.
Bow Wolf? Who's
No
that
alter
dog with the cowl on it? Is that Ace? No, it's Ace the Bat Hound.
It's Ace the Bat Hound, not to be confused with Bruce Wayne's dog, Ace.
Notice
they
how
should
Ace
put two
does not
together
wear a
really
cowl. Okay, so we have all of that, and then we go into the 60s, and that's when we get the Batman TV show. And we get one of the most iconic themes in TV history. We get that's crazy.
Batman. Have you guys ever seen that show? I know I kind of asked you about it a couple days ago, but were you able to watch any episodes?
I haven't seen it recently, but I've watched some TV Land and seen it, and it's very silly. It's a very silly thing, but I could see. I mean, it's very entertaining. I can see why it would have been really popular.
The Adam West Batman is my wife's favorite Batman. So
Really?
going in when we first started dating, of course, one of the questions I asked on our first date was, "Do you like Batman? And who's your favorite villain?" And she was like, "I like the Penguin," but I was deceived because I didn't realize she was talking about 1966 Penguin. So this went on for months until she finally revealed that she loved Adam West Batman, and I had huge contempt for Adam West Batman because I was like, "That's not Batman. It's so campy and stupid, and Batman's dark and gritty and vengeful." And then I started watching the show and I fell in love with it. So I've her to thank for my love for all iterations of Batman now.
Well, it's weird too. The Batman theme song. I'm on this Batman theme right now. But even the theme song, you can just see kind of the attitude. It's literally like a surf rock song.
Yeah, it does feel very like California surfer for sure.
And Batman has nothing to do with like the ocean or beach culture.
He does surf in that show.
Does he really?
Does he?
Does surf. Yep.
Yeah. So they were playing off of maybe the Cultural Revolution happening at the time a little bit.
100%. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I know he dances. There's that famous meme of him boogieing. You know,
yeah. Yep.
It's very silly, fun.
It's incredible.
Yeah, Chris is doing the dance. Very good, Chris. Yeah, it's crazy. Like from what I remember of the show, it was like he basically was a detective, and when he'd find like a laser fence, he'd just pull out a thing that repelled lasers. It was very much like, oh, I've got
the bat laser repellent.
It was very much his like gadgets in his arsenal and stuff was always just perfect. He's like, oh, there's sharks. Luckily, I bought this anti-shark ray.
This bat shark repellent, which was a thing. That was a thing in the movie.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's incredible. The thing that blows my mind about that show is how completely stupid every single citizen of Gotham seems to be. Like, Batman and Robin are definitely the smartest people in the whole city. But that's not by a huge margin. They're just the smartest people out of like...
It's the low bar.
So we have Adam West, historically, famously as Batman, and then Casey Kasem. Both have since passed, R.I.P., and I think they're both wonderful. Went on to have wonderful careers. Very exciting moment, too. Casey Kasem did the Top 40 thing. Do you remember that? He would host Top 40?
No.
I used to work out in this gym that was like 24 hours, and they always played the radio station that Top 40 was on, and it'd be Casey Kasem, and he's like, all right, and today we listen to this Top 40 song. We've got David Bowie. David Bowie historically likes to do his laundry because it helps connect him to everyday people. Okay, here's playing Ziggy Stardust. See you guys on the other side. Yeah, so, yeah, Casey Kasem historically did the... Go ahead.
Didn't Ryan Seacrest take over for him?
I think he did. Yeah.
Not as maybe not on the same level of historical relevance, but
that was fast. He did. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a long-winded conversation.
Well, Ryan Seacrest is like one of those dudes that is just like he just will do any TV thing for top dollar. Like New Year's, Seacrest. Top 40, let's get Seacrest. I don't know. I should have done more research, but Casey Kasem, I think, did more acting and voice work and stuff like that. I don't know if Ryan Seacrest does any voice work.
I was going to say, did
Casey Kasem?
Did Adam West do a lot of live action stuff after Batman? Because I know he did voice work.
He was always on Family Guy as Adam West.
Right.
I don't know if he did a lot of live stuff. Maybe I'm wrong about him having a great career. Maybe did Adam West just ride Batman for the rest of his life?
He definitely did other acting things, but the Batman thing is definitely what stuck with him, I think, for most of his life. But he always seemed to be pretty, at least in the later years, pretty accepting of that. He was always very gracious towards fans and stuff.
Yeah, I heard him on a couple interviews, and he was just very down to earth, like very opposite of Alan Rickman's character in Galaxy Quest. He's very...
Yes. Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would have liked to meet him at one point. He seemed like a really, really nice guy.
He played himself a lot.
Yeah.
I'm looking through his IMDb, and he played himself quite a bit. And he played Alfred. He played Alfred the butler on Angels with Angels, which is very funny to look at.
Interesting.
So this is Alfred the butler that's not tied to Batman?
No, not at all.
No.
That's a coincidence.
So I take it back. Long and lustrous career? No. Batman haunted him till his dying day, and he was just fine with it. It's terrible. No, but very sweet guy. A lot of love and support for that. Him and his family.
Yeah.
Because he was insanely, especially, I knew later Adam West as big on Family Guy and being hilarious and really taking over. He didn't play Batman, he played Adam West as a character.
The mayor, yeah.
And fantastic comedic timing. Great actor. Anyway, so we've got a little sidetracked here. Just a wee bit.
Casey Kasem.
Casey Kasem. Now we're coming to 1960, campy and fun. On to 1970. Chris, why don't you tell us about 1970?
So after the camp of 1960s Batman, DC wanted to bring back some of the edgier darkness to the comic. And that's where Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams came in. And they helped create one of the more famous Batman villains in Ra's al Ghul. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, however you want to pronounce it. But I believe that Denny O'Neil pronounces it Ra's al Ghul. Since he created the character, I'm going to go with what he says.
I'll accept that.
There's that.
It's made up, so, it's best to go to the guy who made it up.
Right, exactly, like the guy who wrote it. So 1970s was a little bit darker for Batman, but for whatever reason, and I definitely recommend going back and reading some Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams stories because they're fantastic. But Batman sales really didn't take off a whole lot. And that's what led up to 1980s Frank Miller and writing Batman The Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, which were huge successes. I mean, those comics are basically responsible for bringing Batman back to the spotlight and back to success. Have you read either of those?
I read Dark Knight Returns back in college, and I also read some of the, at the time I was kind of going through a phase of getting into comics seriously, and I had a roommate who let me borrow copies of The Long Halloween and most of the Loeb and Sale stuff that I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit here. But I read Dark Knight Returns at that time, and I started rereading it recently for the pod, but probably only got through about the first issue of that run. But I was kind of mind blown by how great it was, and really am excited to keep digging into it because it does a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it was the catalyst for like everything we have now. Like we wouldn't have gotten Tim Burton's 1989 Batman had it not been for Frank Miller in 1986 writing The Dark Knight Returns, which is pretty cool. Have you guys on this list here of like comics that I also recommend from the 1980s? I have the Death of the Family story arc. Are you familiar with what that is in Batman?
No.
So Death of the Family is when they had the readers vote on whether or not to kill Jason Todd, the second Robin. And basically what you would do is you would call a phone number and then press 1 or 2 to vote whether he lived or died. And it turned out the fans wanted him dead. So they killed a Robin in the comic book, which is also like falls in line with that dark tone that DC was trying to go for in the 80s.
That's so interesting because just in the bit that I've read, there's Wayne is talking to Gordon and he makes reference to something like especially after what happened to Jason. And I guess at that point, Jason was still alive. And then afterwards, they just killed him off.
Yeah. Yeah, because A Death of the Family, I guess, came out in 1988, I think, which was 2 years after The Dark Knight Returns came out.
Wow.
So Frank Miller was kind of predicting what might happen, I suppose. Or maybe Frank Miller just really hated Jason Todd as a character. He was like, I'm going to kill this character before anyone else does. We're just not going to see it.
Wow.
Now,
that's
I
wild.
am, admittedly, and this is why the listeners' feedback is so important, what right do we have to talk about this stuff? I don't read many comics. It's very hard for me to read it. And we'll get into this a bit later about what I think is going to really help and change that. But I always find myself getting very distracted. So I have not read The Dark Knight Returns. I have seen the animated film based on that.
Right.
Chris, you could probably speak. How close is that in adherence to the comic?
So they do take some liberties, but if you're like Christian and you prefer to watch things rather than like read comic books, and I'm not saying, Christian, you prefer to watch things over read things, but when it comes to comic books specifically, the Dark Knight Returns animated adaptation is actually pretty faithful. The only thing you really miss out on is Batman's inner monologue. So if you like hearing what Batman is thinking in any given situation, and to be perfectly honest, it really does add a whole lot to the story in the comic. I would read the comic. But if you don't mind missing out on that, like, the adaptation is a perfectly viable way to ingest that material.
And you mentioned... Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you remembered, Chris. Some of the stuff that I really liked just rereading it was the newscasters and kind of how we see the events as they play out, and then we see how the newscasters cover them and the potential like disparities between those stories. Was that something that they did in the digital one?
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, visually, you can't simulate how it's drawn out in the comic, like that huge splash page with all the talking heads on it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, they still have the newscasters talking about like how they feel about what's going on in Gotham.
I gotta check that out.
It's cool, man. Good. It's like 2 hours, I think. They broke it up into 2 parts, but if you put both parts together, it's like a 2-hour movie. It's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember really liking it. And Chris, you had mentioned that this was like a darker turn for the character. In today's standards, do you still feel like it's a dark tale, or do you feel like it's pretty, light compared to the depths of darkness we've seen Superman and Batman go to in some more modern stuff?
So I would say after 1980, we hit like a swell of darkness in the tone of the comic, and then it kind of balanced out, right?
Okay.
So in 1990, 2000, 2010, you still have darker Batman stories, but you also have fun Batman stories. It's a little more balanced now, but we never quite get all the way back to the camp that was like 1960, because people prefer Batman to be a little more brooding, I would suppose.
So I guess that the 90s are known for for not only in comics, I guess, but also in music, with grunge coming in, things like hip hop as well, gangster rap in the later times. Do you feel like that's kind of just representative of culture getting a little darker in general? Or are we getting cynical?
There was a tonal shift, right? So I don't want to say society as a whole is getting more cynical, because I don't believe that. But at least in certain types of art or in certain characters, they are leaning more toward that darker, cynical side.
So in the 80s, there was a drug that was introduced to the American people, and its name was cocaine. So with cocaine, so I think the whole vibe of the 80s to me has always been a coke-fueled rage. So towards
Coke
the
fest,
end of it, you've
Coke
got this huge depression and dark inner glooming.
The 90s is the come down.
Everybody's coming down.
The 90s is the grungy come down.
That's when they decide to break Batman's back.
That's when you stop cutting your hair. That's when you start smelling. That's when you start self-loathing. And then we start
wearing flannel.
And then we get Bane. So tell us, the 90s. What does the 90s bring us?
So I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are very familiar with the character of Bane, especially after Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises.
What?
But Bane
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Bane was introduced in the 90s in the Nightfall story arc. And just like the movie, in the story arc, he essentially breaks all these people out of Blackgate and Arkham to push Batman to his breaking point, right? Like completely physically and mentally exhaust him. It was like this huge night where he has to basically round up all these criminals. And then at the very end, when he's right at his breaking point, he literally breaks him and breaks his back. So it's the first part of that story arc is really good. And then it kind of takes a turn where it's not so good, but leading up to Bane breaking Batman's back, it's definitely worth reading.
So is this a killing of Batman?
No. He doesn't kill him. He doesn't cripple him either, because like Batman comes back, but he puts him out of commission, where another character, John Paul Valley, has to take over the Batman mantle for a while and fight crime in Gotham. However, the way John Paul Valley tends to go about it isn't the same way that Bruce would go about it. So he's a more vengeful, a more aggressive, violent Batman. And I mean, not to ruin it for you guys, but at the end, the two have to come to grips with one another and duke it out. But yeah, that's the stuff that's not as great as like the build up to Bane breaking Batman's back.
So that's kind of a peak in the 90s run?
Yeah, along with that, I mean, again, I have a list here of a whole bunch of comics that I really like. Brian mentioned this earlier, but Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's The Long Halloween came out in the 90s. Batman Dark Victory came out in the 90s. And a lot of people consider those to be kind of part of the Dark Knight Returns universe. So like these Elseworld stories that take place outside of the normal continuity, but could potentially fall in the timeline of that same world. So that's pretty cool. Mad Love also came out in the 90s, which was the first introduction of Harley Quinn by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, the creators behind Batman the Animated Series.
And this is also the time that we're getting all the Schumacher movies.
The Schumacher movies.
The Schumacher movies, which are kind of this antithetical, like bringing back that 60s style and kind of goofball antics, just infinite, like, needing gadgets, selling toys, real kids affair.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I remember loving those action figures in the 90s. I didn't have a whole lot of them, but my friends did, and they were always fun.
I had one of my favorites was I don't know if you remember this, Brian, because me and Brian grew up together. I had this Batmobile that had like the blue light up inside. That was cool. And I loved all that, and I think it worked really well. And yeah, it's like blatant consumerism and stuff, but I had a lot of fun interacting with those toys, with the character of Batman. And Batman's not like, even through these films, he's not really a despicable person. I remember even in Batman and Robin, he doesn't really. There's some, like, it doesn't go very deep, but there's some like correct mentorship roles. I mean, Batman isn't a really good mentor to Robin. If you look back on Batman and Robin, but it kind of is about that relationship of a mentor and mentee.
Honestly, I don't really mind Chris O'Donnell as Robin. Like, he's not a bad Robin.
No, he's fun, and it starts off with that he's in like the circus and stuff, and
right. And he plays Dick Grayson, so parents died in the circus or whatever, and then he runs away, gets adopted by Batman.
always need dead parents.
Yep, always.
If you're gonna be anything in this world, your parents better not be alive.
It's a great motivating force. Disney knows this.
Oh yeah, except Disney tends to kill one parent.
Well, this is true.
So we go into the 2000s, and we get a couple different iterations. You're going to talk about Grant Morrison's run.
Yep. And things get really interesting. Grant Morrison's philosophy when it comes to Batman, and Brian and I have talked about this, is he essentially believes that everything that Batman has ever done has happened in this one man's life. So everything from 1939 to 2006, roughly around the time when he first started, is all taking place in this one man's life. And he really draws on everything for the types of stories that he tells during his run. He's also responsible for Damian Wayne, who's now very popular Robin. He's the most recent Robin. He killed Batman. So I don't know if you guys have read Final Crisis or Batman R.I.P. They killed him in two different ways during that run. But yeah, he's responsible for a lot of crazy and interesting Batman stories. His run on Batman and Robin was really cool because after Batman's death, it was basically Dick Grayson and Damian both having to like come to terms of losing a father figure, as well as figure out what their dynamic is as Batman and Robin. Because Dick Grayson isn't Bruce Wayne. He's a performer. He was a circus performer, so he's more upbeat. He tends to smile more often, whereas Damian is really the more brooding character out of the duo. So you get kind of a switch in the dichotomy that you typically see in Batman and Robin, and that's really interesting and fresh, or it was fresh for the time. Brian, have you read any of that? I can't remember.
I've read a bit of Morrison's run on Batman, and I actually read one that was out of the continuity of it. And from what I've read, it definitely is psychological in a way that I feel like some of the other Batmans that I've read weren't. Final Crisis, I loved Final Crisis, and I know you're more into the superhero side of comics than I am. But I really enjoyed these stories, and obviously we're in this age of crossover movies, so I'm sure many people listening agree. But I love taking these characters and kind of putting them in these situations where they have to show their greatest stuff and what comes when all of the greatest superheroes of the universe get together. And like you said, they do kill off Batman, although it's kind of like a subtle, like there's like a shadow at the end where it's like, is he dead or is he like hiding in this cave or something?
Would we really kill off Batman?
Right,
I mean,
he's still there.
They killed off Superman, but he ended up coming back. Like, no one ever dies in comic books.
After that,
the second, I didn't even get upset. Like, the second I saw him die, I was like, this isn't going to stick. I just got to wait it out.
And the whole build up to it, just the Flash, like, racing against the ultimate assassin to, like, stop this bullet. It was just like, this is everything I want from a good comic book, you know?
It was pretty cool.
So during these 2000 years, we also get what a lot of people in more popular culture, like outside of the comic book stuff, we get the Nolan Batman series, the beginning.
Yeah.
And we get that with Batman Begins. And what I really like about this series and what I think connects with a lot of people was it definitely took a tonal turn. And Chris Nolan, already a really great filmmaker who we might talk about in an episode coming up, really classical, but also kind of making his own film language. You know, he took the character Batman and said, okay, what if a dude actually did this? Like, really took it back to ground zero and just said, you know, okay, you got a dude who's a billionaire. What drives this billionaire to want to be, like, essentially a crazy vigilante ninja? And, you know, what would have to push him to this point, and really grounded the series, and obviously was directed really well, and, you know, it's so good that, like, honestly, the least interesting part about any of those movies is Batman. You know, it's just kind of the style that's around it, the characters, the villains that surround him, that really make it. And I think that's really awesome that Batman's kind of a surrogate for just someone who's trying to do good and trying to figure his way around it. That he would, I mean, he's interesting, but he's definitely far from the most interesting person about those. But we kind of get those, which really spikes Bat fever. And I can only imagine, and Chris, you're going to back me up, that this sparks probably a lot more interest in Batman comics. So what do we get during the really successful films of Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and Dark Knight Rises?
So during that era, that's kind of when you have Grant Morrison's run in the comic books. And like I said, he had a very, well, let me say this. He had a very divisive run on Batman. I feel like when it comes to Grant Morrison, you either love him or you hate him. There's no in between. But yeah, those movies definitely, once again, because it had been almost 10 years, I think, maybe like 8 years since the last Schumacher Batman film. So there was a huge gap in, like, the public consciousness for Batman, at least when it came to the movies. So Batman Begins coming out
2005.
2005, so about 8 years, right? Definitely sparked people's interests again. I'm sure they're going back out to comic book stores and buying Batmans, but I think it was really when The Dark Knight came out. That's when people were like, oh crap, like,
who is this?
Batman is awesome, right?
Yeah, and really, we're not going to get too into the Joker this episode. You know, the Joker has his own following and mythos, and has become, you know, I would say even bigger than Batman, especially with The Dark Knight, especially with that performance that Heath Ledger did. And I think some of the more interesting Batman tales include the Joker and really add to the color. But yeah, 2008, The Dark Knight is, you know, I know some people we're in, like, this era of people, like, crapping on it right now, which is weird online. People
really?
Like, was The Dark Knight really that good? I've read so many of these articles. And even some people at work have talked, and they're like, oh, it's an okay movie. And I'm like, you're crazy. Because
I do remember a lot of people at our job, or my previous job, really, really crapping all over Batman. Those were always interesting discussions.
Right. And I really think The Dark Knight's, like, a cinematic masterpiece of a film outside of even being a comp. Like, if you just named it, or, I mean, obviously if it had a stupid name, but if it was just named, like, Ninja Dude, right? And you took away, like, the Batman aspect of it, and had another idea of fear or something, the movie still works in every single way possible.
Dude, last year, Collider did this whole series. It was like top 50 superhero movies of all time, right? And every day they would release a new video talking about like that particular movie, where it ranked. The Dark Knight was number one. In 2017. It was still number one. So
I think they almost stand above other comic book movies in a way, and I think it may also be why. And I'm not saying that the later DC movies are not flawed, because they definitely are, but it's kind of a really high bar to start off your mainstream DC extended universe with.
yeah,
that is the hard part about making good shit.
you set the bar, and then you never know if you're going to get back there.
And it seems like he didn't want to do The Dark Knight Rises as by that point that's number 3, and I still think there's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, that film opens with such a badass scene.
It's not a perfect movie, but it was still entertaining, and I think it caps off the trilogy well.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's attempting to wrap things up, which is never fun in comic book stuff. Comic books are kind of always about that to be continued, next steps, and this movie was really about finality. And it was almost a Batman that didn't want to be Batman. He didn't want to be Batman anymore.
Right,
kind of
exactly.
We're starting the point of the movie. This guy going like, I'm kind of sick of this. But having to rise to the occasion. Having to rise.
But, I mean, in that movie, they also kind of, Jesus, the fire rises.
Yeah, I think... it shows you in kind of the after effects that people were doing the Joker and imitating him, but it wasn't like, it was kind of annoying to hear anybody do it. If they were good at it, I'd be like, you're good, but don't do that, it's creepy. Whereas Bane, just as we showed in this podcast, it's so tempting to do Bane, and I think a lot of that is a little sidetrack, but a lot of that is just the way that his voice is mixed. I don't even think his voice is that weird. Tom Hardy does weird stuff with his voice, but if you watched it in theaters, it would kind of be like someone be talking, and I'll try to do some audio tricks to make this work for the listener, but it'd be kind of like, Gordon, we need you over here. And it'd be like, I don't really know what you see. And then it'd be like, the Bane is all in the front of the speaker. He's all around you. And he does, I'm peeking everything right now. But he sounded, I remember distinctly seeing the movie, and as soon as he started talking, I instantly went, he doesn't sound like he's there. He is. And I think the rumors were when it was coming out that he was hard to understand. So they had to re-record his dialogue.
Did you get to see any of that preview footage? I forget what movie they showed it in front of, but they showed like 5 to 10 minutes of The Dark Knight Rises, and it was the opening sequence with Bane in the plane. I was able to see it, and you could not hear anything he was saying.
Really?
So I'm pretty sure they basically just mixed his voice up, like louder than everyone else's, and that
obvious.
created the weird effect that you were just talking about.
So that movie has structural problems, but I do think Bane is a pretty good, interesting character. And I think Tom Hardy does a good job. I think maybe he should have been reined in a little bit with where he was going with his voice. But it just shows you kind of the difference between those. Anyway, that's a long way.
I feel like we might get a repeat performance in the new Venom movie coming out.
Yeah, and then he's doing a weird thing again. What does he say? He's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this... Yeah, and Venom sounds like silly Venom. It sounds like, this is what Venom sounded like in a 90s children's cartoon. Let's just do that. So that's pretty expected. What's not expected is like Tom Hardy just talks weird as a human. He's like, I don't following you around, and you're like,
He's a little spastic.
Are you hammered?
Why did we do that?
Why did we do that? Where am I from? I'm from like I don't know.
Can't place him.
He does kind of sound like he's from New York.
I'm from New Jersey soda. Okay, so we're getting all the Nolan films, and up until recent years, who's doing Batman? What are the main Batman stories?
So in early 2010s, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo were basically the team that were writing Batman. After Flashpoint, are you guys familiar with Flashpoint? No? Okay. So after the Flashpoint story arc where Flash went back in time to try and save his mother and ended up changing a whole bunch of things in the present, DC essentially rebooted all of their comic books, creating the New 52 was the way that they were branding the new comics. And that's when Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo took over. And personally, they, in my opinion, are the best writer artist team that has ever touched the Batman series, because every single arc that they did during that period was gold. It was so awesome. Like, you had the Court of Owls. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. They did a Death of the Family arc where Joker essentially tried to kill the entire Bat family to ensure that it was just Batman and him that would like live on.
Ace?
Even Ace. I don't think they had that comic run. They did Zero Year, which was like another take on Batman's origin. Endgame. Super Heavy was a really cool arc where Batman had disappeared in the previous arc and Commissioner Gordon took over being Batman. So that was something we hadn't seen ever, and it was really, really cool. But yeah, if you haven't checked out the Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo run on Batman, that's another run that I would definitely recommend reading because it's fantastic. They're actually going to be the duo releasing one of the stories under the Black Label coming up here over the course of the next year. So I'm super stoked for that.
Yeah,
But that's not a Batman story, is it?
It is a Batman story.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it actually sounds really interesting. But yeah, I would definitely check them out. Right now, I believe Tom King is writing Batman, but I kind of fell off reading the comics after Snyder and Capullo left. So I haven't read as many as Tom King's issues as theirs, but I hear that he's doing a good job.
So in 2012, we get Dark Knight Rises. A year before that, we get Batman Arkham Asylum, which is a video game. And it's very narrow, but what they nail about that and Batman, what I think is they have this darker tone. They kind of go more for a comic booky thing, and they just have wonderful performances, leaning very heavily on Mark Hamill's Joker, which I think is... and Kevin Conroy's Batman.
And Kevin Conroy's
bringing
Batman.
That animated series vibe that they had, and really incorporating that in, and really getting the performances down. And then, the gameplay works and makes you feel enough like Batman. And that only kept getting better and building on it as we got the sequels to that, which would be Arkham City and Arkham Knight. I only played Arkham Knight, I think, which I think was when they really polished up the mechanics and how that game worked and the city traversal, and they added the Batmobile. From what I've heard, it's not the strongest of the stories.
Dude.
Yeah.
No way. Like, I need to let you borrow Arkham City for the PS4. I feel like Arkham City, while Arkham Knight is amazing and looks beautiful, and it's great that they finally added the Batmobile, Arkham City was really the peak of that franchise. Sure. You're in the Batmobile so often in Arkham Knight. It's like they created a feature, and then they were just like, this is great. Like, we're going to use it everywhere.
Now,
like, it really hindered things.
Arkham City, what was the plot of that?
Batman gets trapped in... Arkham City, basically, a city full of villains.
You know what? I might have beat that game. I might have played it.
I feel like you played it.
I could have sworn I played Arkham Knight. I know I didn't finish Arkham Knight because I never found out who the Arkham Knight was.
Oh, wow.
And I never will. No one can tell me. I'm not going to play the game. I just never want to know.
I'm going to spoil it for you right after we finish recording.
So do you guys feel like... as you probably know, listeners, if you've been keeping up, I am not the video game guy here. But I'm wondering, I know at some point video games have been slowly morphing into almost movie productions in themselves. Do you feel like this set of games kind of drove that, or was that starting even earlier?
I think it may have contributed, but I really think like games like Uncharted and Last of Us.
And I think what really started storytelling more than anything would be like Japanese RPGs. They started really early in the even late 80s, early 90s, telling stories.
It's like the Final Fantasies and stuff.
Final Fantasies.
But really... as far as American video games go,
Western video games, I mean, really cinematic stuff, like he's saying, Uncharted. But yeah, this is definitely part of it, and especially part of like good comic book video games. There's a lot of garbage that has come out in the last 20 years when it comes to intellectual property, nonetheless, like video game based on comic books and superheroes. So it was a great turn, and really you could tell Rocksteady, who's the developer, it was a passion project for them, and they loved the character and wanted to nail it. And you can feel that, and it is very interesting and very like yeah, it kind of puts you in there and get great gadgets, and you get the stealth, and it really feels like you're this terrifying force, and
you feel like you're
too.
Batman.
Yeah, they do. They also incorporate like the detective stuff, which I think is really important.
In any great Batman story, that detective work is super, super important, and that's where I feel like a lot of the Batmans that not as many people like fall short. They don't have as much of that detective work
now,
going
almost
on.
2 years to the date, something came out that I thoroughly enjoyed that was related to Batman. Chris, do you know what I'm referring to?
I really hope you're not referring to Batman v Superman. Is that?
That is something that happened. We've got Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad he was in, and then Justice League. We got the Batfleck.
Yeah, Batfleck.
Which I don't think...
Multiple Marthas.
I actually...
Your mom's name is Martha too? Oh my god.
No way, bro.
So you have a weird thing where they decided to reboot Batman without giving Batman a film and an entry level to understand this Batman. But we get Batman first in Batman v Superman. And we get this new take on Batman that's definitely not like taking it in a totally different direction. But I don't hate where he starts. It just isn't explained very well, I think. And it's a little jarring because I don't think the films do a good job of letting you know where Batman is. And he kind of, to be honest, changes where he is like in Justice League. But I like the idea that this Batman, they decided to reflect it as Batman don't give no shits no more. Like, Batman is over everything. Like,
he's totally jaded.
Yeah, being Batman has not worked well for Batman. You know, it does work bullets and putting people down for good. And that's the Batman they went for, which is a take.
It's not my hashtag, not my Batman. I actually really like Ben Affleck as Batman, and I'm disappointed that we might never get to see him in a solo Batman movie because I really think he would have thrived, especially if the script was strong. But oh my god, the things that he did in Batman v Superman were just so un-Batman-like. Dude, even the Batman in The Dark Knight Returns uses effing, I know we're not trying to curse on this podcast, but effing rubber bullets, all right? This dude was blowing people up, breaking their necks, using real bullets.
Well, that's what I like, is like you have this old grizzled... They really were spinning it as this is Batman at the end of being Batman, which is weird when you're first bringing him into your new cinematic universe.
But Frank Miller Batman is also Batman at the end of being Batman.
This is past that, Chris. And I didn't like it at first, but then as I understood it, I don't mind different takes like that. You know, sure, it's hashtag not your Batman, but it still is a cool point to put Batman at. Whether that's going to be his end and his undoing, or he has some place to grow and change from there. Yeah. Which I think he does. I don't know, because Justice League, he's a different character. But
I mean, in Justice League, he's Joss Whedon's Batman,
right?
So,
yeah, that I think that series of films that introduce Batman, the ones that don't, are panned critically a little too hard, but definitely have their flaws. They're definitely stuff to criticize there. But I don't hate that where Batman starts there. I don't mind that's a take that he had on him. What are you guys' thoughts? Hashtag not your Batman.
Aesthetically, I love the design of his suit. Like
aesthetically?
Aesthetically, yeah. Like the short-eared Batman cowl, I've always been a huge fan of. Jim Lee tends to draw Batman with a little with shorter ears than normal. So I really like the suit that he wears. I think it's pretty cool for a cinematic Batman suit. And like I said, Ben Affleck is not a bad Bruce Wayne or Batman. I just think he was dealt a crap hand and a bad script.
Yeah,
big old pile of Bat the Ace Hound sitting in his hand.
Maybe Ace would have made that movie better. Who knows?
Come on, Ace. He shoots him out of the jet.
I would have watched that. Brian, what's your take?
So I definitely agree with Christian that I think they're panned a bit much. Definitely flawed, largely in terms of, I think you touched on this too, Christian, like not really explaining his background enough. But I did appreciate how he's very much this traumatized, nearly broken man who's trying to come to terms with this long life, and that's something that does pull from stuff that Batman had gone through.
I mean,
previously.
he lost a Robin. We saw that there's an empty Robin suit still in the Batcave, so a Robin did apparently die in that universe, just like in the comics.
Right, which would be something to put him over the edge. Just we don't get
Right,
a
that
solo
changes a
film
person.
to
Sure.
show us that, and I don't think we have to. But when you're introducing such a different take on Batman, we're like, this is a new Batman. This is all new Batman. He doesn't have a movie, and he's kind of this antagonist in this movie, and we'll hint at what's pushed him to here, but we won't execute any of it particularly well. I like the I like the subtlety in which they're trying to explain that he lost Robin, and that's possibly what put him at this edge of like, screw it, I'm killing dudes. However, what's going to stop that rage is not the name of your mom.
Yeah, it was definitely a silly moment. That's you got to laugh at it. It's just ridiculous that would be the point where he starts to care. But I did feel like he was almost
also had a dog
representative.
named Ace the Bat. That would have probably been better. Sorry to cut you off, Brian.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I did feel like I know you really liked Superman. Superman Returns. Is that the one with Man of Steel? Excuse me. Right. And the villain's name, I'm blanking on it. Zod.
Yeah, General
Zod. Right.
Yeah.
So
General
I think
Zod.
Watching that movie and Superman being this symbol of hope and this savior for humanity in a lot of ways, it did feel a little bit out of touch when he's fighting this invincible character and just demolishing buildings to fight this guy who's like realistically not going to be killed in this context. So I feel like Batman does have this perspective where I agree that there's this whole conflict about Batman never killing, and I know sometimes and some people take liberties with that, and this is going to be a good place to lead into Damned maybe, but I did appreciate how he's this very human. He's got this very human perspective on like, who is this guy who thinks he can just come destroy our buildings for what he views as hope when he's not even from here.
Sure.
So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, there's so much to be said about that. I mean, we could probably talk for an hour about what's promising about those movies and what ultimately disappoints and I think makes them not as successful as what we see in Marvel. I think they are taking more chances. They're being a little bit more risky, but then they're also
trying to wipe the slate clean, I think.
Yeah. I think it's such a weird dichotomy, those movies, because I do think there's some there's cinematography, there's music, and there's moments in those films that I think are more powerful than most things in a Marvel movie or what Sony's ever tried to do.
When Snyder's on, he's on.
When Snyder's on, there's scenes of like, okay, when Batman breaks, I know this is an action set piece, but the Batman vs Superman contains one of the most well choreographed badass Batman shots ever, and it's the thing that sucks is it's such a stupid scene. The premise of it is so dumb. But it is so cool and well realized, and it's Batman and all his. It's very much the Arkham City and Arkham Asylum Batman, which I think is really cool. I think there is a little bit of influence that actually comes back into the films from the video game there, of him whipping on dudes and just being a brute.
Are you talking about the scene in the building where he's going to save Martha Kent and he's like,
wait, did
grappling
you say Martha?
He's God. You know Martha too? Where is she?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the scene where he's like grappling people or grappling boxes and like throwing people? Yeah, that's pretty badass. But he's murdering those people.
They're dead.
They're dead.
Yeah. Does Batman have a grenade? If I remember correctly, I think Batman pulls out a grenade.
I think he might. A bat grenade.
And he goes, "Suck on this."
No,
I don't think he says that. Suck on my bat grenade. I think I remember that vividly in the film.
And then Mr. Freeze comes in with some ice skaters.
Time to chill.
And then he pulls out the bat skates. God, I'm gonna have talking about all this Batman and all the iterations. I'm gonna have like a fever dream tonight of like all the different Batmans colliding with each other.
I want you to wake up tomorrow morning and record that fever dream so we know exactly what happened.
Bane coming in. Batman, why are you the bane of my existence? What is happening? Okay, so we've talked about Batman and the different ways, and we've barely touched, I mean, literally, we've barely touched on all the different, comic book iterations, video game iterations. We just kind of hit some of the big highlights.
Yeah.
So when we get back from the break, we're going to be talking about why Batman is such an important character, why he connects with so many people, why we've had so many different takes, and then we'll get into Batman the Damned, right, Chris?
We will!
Excelsior. Well, that's not.
Excelsior!
That's not Bob Kane or Dick Finger.
No,
what's his
definitely
name?
Not. Bill Finger.
Bill Finger.
Big Finger.
Bill Finger.
Richard Finger. All right, so cool. We'll be right back, guys. Pop-O-Holics. Anyway, so we're back talking about Batman, and we took some time to talk about the history of Batman. Very lightly went over that, and now we're going to talk about why does anybody give a shit about Batman? Why has Batman survived for 70? How many years now? 70 years?
Over 75 years.
Over 75 years. That's a long time. There's a lot of characters.
Almost. Oh my gosh! Almost. So 79 years. That's crazy.
So
that's wild.
What are our thoughts? What we talked a little bit about what got us into Batman and some of the iterations that we enjoyed as kids and as adults. But what is it about Batman? Why do people love Batman? Why does Batman keep coming back?
So I mean, the reason why I think Batman is so successful and long lasting is, and this is also why a lot of people at our old job especially didn't like him, is because Batman is a human, right? He is supposed to be the best possible version of what the human physique and mind has to offer, right? He kind of represents that indomitable human spirit, right? So I think that's why he's such a timeless character, because you can aspire to be Batman, right? Like, no one's gonna obviously invest billions of dollars into gadgets and planes and cars and suits.
Don't you limit me, Chris.
I mean but that's exactly it though. like it could possibly be attainable being Batman.
I completely
you could
agree.
Totally do it. I think that you'd run into some problems like dying.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. But that's why all the martial arts training comes in. I mean, there's a reason why Bruce Wayne disappears as a teen and then comes back as a 30-year-old, kind of like the Jesus tale. There's a huge chunk of time in which he is fine-tuning his skills to be the Batman that he needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important that you don't have a... But, I mean, again, it would be interesting, maybe an iteration where you have young, like, teenage Batman, or young, like, college Batman, like Spider-Man thing. But I think that is what kind of separates him from some of the other superheroes that are a lot younger or more immature and stuff, is that he regardless of his iterations, he's still kind of like a very old adult. Like, he kind of is adult about everything.
Yeah.
With the exception of, like, being a sociopath.
Well, and I think that adult nature definitely comes from, we, in ridiculous amount of iterations, see how traumatized he is from losing his parents. He sees the harsh reality of the world from a young age and is constantly trying to get over that and compensate for it and be this symbol that those who are helpless in the world can, hope for.
Right.
Yeah, and I think
he's like a weird... I want to say that he's kind of like a symbol of hope, but I would say Superman's more like a symbol of hope.
Sure.
But
he's kind of using, I really like Nolan's take, and I think why that connected with people is because it made a lot of sense of why someone would do it. Because I think it's really hard to justify and ground the reality of superheroes. Because I think a lot of us, truth be told, as much as I believe in the good of humankind, if I could have superpowers, there's parts of my personality that would be very dangerous to achieve such power. That goes back to the Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. But I think you do have to especially for a man that doesn't even have any innate supernatural powers other than being like really rich and ninja training, is like how do you express the story of a man who would be put to these links? And I think that the Nolan films do a pretty good job of doing that and framing him as someone who wants to fight for what's right, and his only way that he can like materialize that is through fear, and he wants to put fear into the hearts of criminals and use that against them and weaponize just the idea of being afraid against bad people. So it's kind of like taking negative energy, taking negative aspects of humanity, and he's basically using that to his advantage and using that against people who are providing an injustice upon the world.
Yeah, channeling it for good.
And that's
totally.
I think that could be maybe, Chris, why you go against him actually killing people in some of the more recent iterations.
Oh yeah, without
because he is this almost justification for vigilantism, but at the same time, you know that he's got this strong moral core to him that people can agree with on some level, or at least understand where he's coming from and what's driving him.
He basically has two rules, right? Like no killing and no guns. Those are like Batman's main rules. So I don't know.
But what happens?
Brian, I interrupted you. Sorry.
I do think it's interesting though when why I don't mind that turn in that character is because he does have those rules. So what pushes a man that would dress up like a bat but still not kill anybody, and he has these rules? I think it is interesting to say, what if that person reaches his limit? Which I think is an inevitable place. I think, the Nolan Batmans kind of hit a really great point in The Dark Knight when he's like, I can't do this forever, man. Like, this is unrealistic that I am dressing up like a bat and extraditing criminals from Hong Kong and, like, beating up people in clown makeup. Like, this has to end. And wanting to replace him with, like, an actual system and people in the justice system that will do their job right. And, his kind of goal was to rid corruption, at least in, the iteration of The Dark Knight.
But then he realizes that the system's corruptible and imperfect. So he's the only force.
Sorry, doing the mind blown thing. You're hitting exactly on it, right? And so he's the only force. But at the end of the day, there is a reality of like he can't do it forever, and exposing himself to that life. One of the reasons why the Punisher is very popular, and I really like the Punisher series. Punisher is kind of what if Batman decided to use guns, and was poor and could only afford good old fashioned American way, just firepower. But I do think it's interesting to have a man that's at the end of his rope, where he's now clearly Ben Affleck's using steroids. Like clearly
what are you talking about, man? He's just lifting tires. That's
no, that man is like 50 years old. You don't get that jacked from just eating paleo, okay? So I'd like to imagine that his Batman is also like hitting his limits and being like, okay, I'm going full steroids, weapons, all that.
There is, and not to nerd out and segue here, but there is an arc in Batman where he starts to use venom, which is like the substance that Bane uses.
Wait, are you talking about this venom?
Yeah,
I like to eat you one little bone at a time.
Sorry. Venom, get out of here.
Bad.
Yeah, so I mean, he does start to use supplements at one point, and then becomes addicted to it, and then realizes that he's addicted, and then weans himself off of it. So I mean, it has happened. So maybe Ben Affleck is using steroids in both real life and in the fictional character that he plays.
So that's kind of like, I think that hits on a lot of it. I think that is actually, is my opinion, that's what kind of made the Marvel Cinematic Universe happen so easily, was they started with Tony Stark, who essentially is Batman, but if you just ignored physics and, less, more play upon the billionaire thing, and he's out in the open about who he is, and it's just kind of Batman from a different angle,
He's the billionaire aspect of Batman. Like Tony Stark has zero fighting talent.
Yeah, he's all brains.
He can fight, but like I think the suit does a lot of the fighting for him, to be honest.
He also loves to schmooze in a way that I feel like Bruce Wayne has never been actually into that lifestyle. He just kind of like has to play the role.
He's kind of like if the fake Bruce Wayne persona was Batman.
Right.
Like if the Bruce Wayne persona and the Batman persona merged into one, and you got that like playboy billionaire schmoozing character that Brian was just talking about, dressed up in a bat suit running around, like that would be Iron Man.
Right, and I think another one of Batman's strengths, and we were talking about this with Spider-Man, is that he has to think through his problems, and because he relies on technology or human will and he's not super powered or whatever, it leads to more interesting conflict. Things can fail, and
Right.
I think that's what really makes interesting conflict within other characters or with him trying to figure out a mystery. Like, it's a lot of him having to work through things and find interesting ways to solve problems, which is how we as humans do it. We don't have unlimited resource or unlimited capabilities. So I think that's innately human thing that we connect with Batman.
See,
Agreed.
I heard something recently on the radio, or it was actually a podcast now that I'm thinking about it, about Sherlock Holmes and the fandom around him. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels with this kind of someone who's set in reality, and he's the perfect detective, but he's also got some aspects to him that seem unattainable to everyday people.
Superhuman intelligence, you know?
Superhuman intelligence, and for Batman, it's obviously ridiculous wealth, but it's kind of maybe nice to think that there's someone out there that, you know, even in a corruptible system, that there can be good that's working from within it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a very, you know, human, if not positive, inherently idea set to hold, you know?
Yeah, without it, I mean, fictional characters like that make us better. They make us as a society want to be better people. Just like you said, if we see examples of those types of people out there using their skills to do good, we want to do good as well, for the most part.
Right. No, I agree.
So knowing all of that, I don't think any of that or anything we've talked about or hit on or discussed is reflected in this new comic, which is, for lack of a better term, batshit crazy in Batman the Damned. And that's.
But I would expect nothing less of Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo. Like, this is
a really cool idea from DC, and I didn't really fully comprehend it until I talked with you, Chris, and actually read the comic. But being able to take really iconic characters, mix and mash them up, and say to hell with continuity is so cool and so interesting that you can have these offshoot stories where these characters are at liberty to go into crazy directions. And man, this is the first in the Black Label series?
This is the first one. Mm-hmm.
Ooh, boy, they're setting the bar pretty high. Because, like I mentioned before, I am not a huge serial comic book reader. I will read one or two things. I still have Sandman sitting on my desk. Kyle gave that to me for my birthday 3 years ago, and I still haven't read it. He's giving me this look because I did tell him I read it, and I didn't. No, I never told you I read it. But I probably will now.
Wait, did you say Kyle or Brian?
Brian. I meant Brian. Did I say Kyle? Sorry, it's a long week. Long weekend. And so it's really hard. I would say that I have a really bad attention span when it comes to reading a comic book. And I'll talk a little bit more about what helped with that. But yeah, this comic is nuts. It's crazy. What were you guys' initial thoughts upon reading it? Start with you, Brian.
So I read it twice, once last week when it came out, and then once just pretty much before the pod. And yeah, I'm pretty blown away by how a single issue can feel like it's doing so much with the character. It really brought some new ideas that I'd never even considered about the Batman archetype and what he could represent. And obviously, it brings in this character, John Constantine, who we just happened to be talking about on some previous pods that that weren't released. But it, I don't know. From the beginning, I'm a big Alan Moore fan, and it starts off with this explicit reference to the Killing Joke, which I don't think you've read, Christian, but you have, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
I saw the animated film, actually in theaters.
Oh, you did?
With Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure how
there's a
closely
theme with,
that.
Was there a movie? Yeah, I saw that. But it comes to
Hey, nothing wrong with that. I heard pretty good things about it, but I think it definitely cuts to the heart of Batman as debatably killing people, right? So I think the Killing Joke is very much about that. And this comic is about the Joker is dead, who killed him? And John Constantine introduces himself as this unreliable narrator who is intrinsically putting himself in the story and tells us he's trying to shape events. So it almost gives you this thing that I feel like comics that I've read at least, you can't really have an unreliable narrator. That's really something that's done on film. And I feel like this is a comic that is very much like a movie in that regard, where it leaves you hanging in a lot of ways.
That's one of the things I love about John Constantine in this book. He even states like he enjoys messing with people's heads.
Yep.
So like, who knows if he's telling the truth or not? Or I mean, honestly, when I was reading the comic, there were points in time where I was like, is Batman alive?
That's exactly what I was thinking. They said they found 2 bodies.
I loved it because I think it fits this format really well. You know, one of my problems with like comic books is I'm always like, yeah, but put this to an animated film, put this to a movie, because it's just, I mean, literally a comic book is with thought bubbles and speech bubbles is essentially a oh god, I'm blanking on this now. In film, when you do frames of the shot and you draw them out.
A storyboard.
Literally, it's a storyboard for a movie, and I'm always like, "Hey, things in motion are cooler than things that are not in motion."
I'm pushing back on this.
Well, what I would say is what I really
this goes beyond a storyboard. This particular comic.
Oh, and I would say this type of questioning reality and questioning what's happening lends itself to going back through it and really trying to pick apart what's happening, what's on the page, and really allows you to digest what's going on. And it reminds me, it's like, oh my god, you know what also worked? We were talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm like, this type of storytelling really lends itself to stuff that they're trying to do in 2000, that Stanley Kubrick was trying to do in 2001, and I think was really well accomplished in the Watchmen comics. And I'm like, these types of stories really fit for comic books and graphic novels for me. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what Bermejo does with art in a lot of the things that I've read of his art is so fluid, and he's a genius when it comes to guiding your eye across the page. Like, there were some pages where my eye would it was almost like a Z motion, the way it had to travel across the page with the speech bubbles and the way the characters were moving. It's just really, really interesting. But it's almost like you're looking at an art book and not a comic book.
Yeah, and you were going to push back, Brian, against me saying, my heretical comment. Obviously, comic books work, and they're a big industry, and people love them. What was your thing when I said, "Hey, it's kind of just like a storyboard"?
I just feel like so something that's I think individual to the comic book experience is the reader's role in it. So you control the time of everything, which is something that movies don't give you the opportunity to do. And you can also, it's more than a storyboard. So an incredible example, you haven't read Sandman, but this is an Overture, the prequel, and there's a character called Destiny, and he's this, I'm not going to get into the whole mythology of the Sandman, but he's basically this representation of an archetype of the universe, and he's a blind character who can only read this book that he's chained to, and within this book are pretty much everything that's contained within the timeline of reality. So he's constantly reading it, and then sometimes he'll be reading and then he becomes part of the story as characters come to interact with him, right? So in Overture, they do this interesting thing where there's something that's not inside of his book, and you literally see his book and a ship poking out of it, like outside of the page. And it's something that I don't think you could really do on film. Sure. And it's this expression that really transcends other mediums in a really interesting way. And people like Alan Moore, I think there's stuff that he did in his early work that couldn't be done on film. And he kind of did things that were very cinematic in the medium prior to film, taking those cues.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I think this comic book accentuates the power that you can have in the format. And I think that I have not given myself the opportunity to see that. I tried to read some Green Arrow, the Kevin Smith run, and tried to read some Ultimate Spider-Man. And that stuff was cool, but it never felt like it was using the format to its advantages.
That's like classic comic book storytelling, though. The two things that you just mentioned, those aren't series that really go out of the box. You know,
literally go out of their frames and stuff. And there was some cool art in that, but man, this comic has some of the most gorgeous freaking visual. The style is like gothic, but that usually turns me off. But it's this kind of dripping, oozing. Oh God!
So
it's insane. I was watching this, going. I was around people when I was reading it, and I'll talk about how I read it in a second, but I kept going, look at this shot, look at this, and I kept showing people, and I kept going,
that's so
look
awesome.
How dope, and I kept changing my back. I was like, okay, now this is going to be the background of my phone. Now this is going to be the background of my phone, because all the darks are really cool, and my phone shows off dark stuff really cool, but man, I was just like so giddy with how gorgeous this comic book is.
I just wanted to point out one really, I mean, I guess it's probably a nerdy detail for me, but I don't know how familiar either of you are with Boston Brand or Deadman, but typically he has just a red outfit, and they made it so his outfit kind of looks muscular. So it's not like his typical fabric that he wears, but it's like he's wearing muscle, which is so crazy, and I've never seen that done before. But the first time I saw it, I was looking at him, and I had to do a double take. I was like, is that fucking Deadman? Like, that's so cool.
Oh, I thought that might be Batman. I need to reread this comic 100 times because I still have no idea what's going on in it, very loosely, and I really like that about it, and I'm so excited to read it again, which I think is the sign of, like, a really cool comic. Okay, Brian, you're going to say something.
Can I just say I'm super excited that you're so stoked about this comic book, because I've never seen you like this about a comic ever in our entire, like, 10-year history
and
together.
I will tell you, I'm really surprised. Now, let me do a little background while I had the opportunity to tell you how I read this as not a comic book reader. So if you're not a comic book reader, you'll maybe align with me. I've gotten the app for iPad before where you can get a comic, and I've read some comics on that. I've obviously got the physical page, and I do really wish I had the physical copy of this, but apparently it's super expensive and should have.
I want to talk about that.
We planned for this like a month ago, and I could have got it, and I didn't. I did not think that I would like it this much. But anyway, I got it on my phone, and I got a pretty big phablet of a phone, and I got it through the DC app, and it was actually kind of a pain in the ass to try and buy it. You couldn't find it on the DC app, so if you have this problem, go online. It lets you buy it through Amazon. It goes right to the DC app. But the way this app works, and have a bigger phone or have a smaller tablet, because what was cool about the sizing of it is it went frame by frame and then would zoom in and out and then expand the page at the very end.
Yeah.
And I have really bad ADD. And I really should have medication or try to meditate or try to get rid of how bad my brain is at focusing at things. So comic books are just innately so hard to get through because you open it up and you're immediately like dart into the most interesting thing. And you were kind of talking about how your eyes, it's an art having your eyes guide through the page. And I do think I can see how it works, but man, being able to just be isolated per frame and seeing them kind of intertwine. And this one was really beautifully done, how it kind of moved from picture to picture and then moved out. It was a really great experience, and I was able to read it on my lunch. And I just enjoyed going through it. So I really did appreciate it on a bigger phone. It was a really, really nice read through that way. But I do wish I had it on hard copy
Dude, that's exactly how I used to read comics in Comixology. Turn on that like frame by frame feature. What I would do is have it show me the full page at the beginning, zoom to each panel in the middle, and then show me the full page again at the end. Because there is something that gets lost if you can't see the whole page at once. There's like an art to it, especially when it comes to splash pages. But I love that feature, especially in your case, because it helped you focus on like what you should have been focusing on in that moment or what you were reading at that moment. So that's awesome.
I think sometimes it would show I think it makes decisions based on what's happening.
It does.
So yeah. I remember sometimes it would show the full page first. It was a little weird orienting the phone to what would fit best because they do it in different shapes. So that's a little weird. I found sideways was usually safer, but there was some when I would flip the phone up. But I honestly had no problem just orienting my phone to where you'd get the most picture in. I would say that's the most awkward part about doing that. But for me, if you have ADD problems and comic books and graphic novels have been hard to get through, definitely worth trying it out. Or
Very
maybe
cool.
even with the iPad. iPad, again, the frame by frame on the iPad, I guess, would work just as well.
I love reading on my iPad Mini. It's awesome.
Branded content.
Yep. Our sponsor today.
Our sponsor today is Seattle. Okay, so that besides me gushing about how gorgeous this book is, it is beautiful. One thing
It
that
shouldn't be understated.
Shouldn't be understated. The iconography. Again, we're probably going to debate what this comic book's about. I kind of want to give my interpretation, my loose interpretation, because it's going to be so off and wrong and stupid and naive. I didn't even know. What did you say? Dark Man?
Dead Man. Dead Man. Dark Man is something completely different. Played by Liam Neeson.
Right.
Dead Man.
But the iconography in this is so incredible, showing Batman falling and kind of interspersing with that kind of him dying. I mean, I thought Batman died in this comic book, which I think he might have. I think he might have
too. Because the thing is, like, whenever you have John Constantine in a book, like he communicates with both the living and the dead, right? So there are instances throughout the book where I was like, all right, maybe Batman's alive, especially those instances in which you see Dead Man possessing people on the streets of Gotham. So like that is only something he would need if Batman was alive, right, to talk to him. Because if Batman was dead, they'd be able to communicate with one another, no problem. But the fact that John Constantine's in the book makes me skeptical as to what we're actually looking at.
Yeah, and I think it was cool him narrating it, because if you do take this and kind of think about it in film terms, this is a 58-page comic. It's somewhere between 55 and
53,
60.
I think.
Okay, so a little less than that. It technically could be like a minute of on-screen time, and man, if this was shot on film and captured with the level of darks and the exposure, it would be the coolest minute of superhero stuff ever. I'm totally down.
It almost feels like you'd need to do like a rotoscope. Or something to really get the...
You understand why Snyder does the style he does. For all his shit and everything that you can give him, he stylizes and shoots it like a comic book, and that really comes across really well. And I was thinking that the whole time. I'm like, damn, if I was like a producer, I'd be like, yeah, Snyder, that's what Snyder does. But yeah, I really, 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 really like the art style in this. I mean, it was incredible. And you said the artist on this was what other work has he done?
He's done a lot of stuff. He illustrated the Joker comic that Brian Azzarello wrote in early 2000s. A couple years ago around Christmas time, I bought Batman Noel, which is a really cool retelling of a Christmas story, or not a Christmas story, a Christmas Carol, basically, where three ghosts come to visit Batman throughout the night. And he illustrates the entire thing. And that book is very similar to how this book is illustrated. The huge splash pages, like the text is kind of just intermingled into the art instead of having the text boxes or word bubbles that you were talking about, Christian. So that's also a fun read around Christmas time if you guys want to check that out. But yeah,
for sure. Do you have any idea if this is largely done digitally? I know a lot of comics today will, but it almost seems like it looks painted at times.
Yeah, that I don't know,
it's
but
really
I would agree with you.
And I don't care how they made it. I wouldn't care if they use like Adobe Illustrator or
no. I was
like
just curious more than anything.
Whatever it is effective, and it's it's almost like like realism. I'm like, I took an art history class and I'm going to butcher it, but it's almost like impressionism, and then it kind of has like, it's kind of dripping, it's kind of like classical style, and it's like realistic, but it's kind of like everything's a little exaggerated, and you get this like really great, like it feels wet, almost like you're saying, like painted.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of said what I said, but in shorter words, as per usual. But and just like we were talking about, like all the iconography. So we talk about how it looks, and that is just really cool looking.
I want to hear what Brian's take on the comic is, because we really haven't gotten.
Oh, I keep cutting him off.
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
gotcha.
You want to talk about
no.
Brian's take on the story or anything?
Tell us the story, Brian. Please interpret this for me.
Should we? I'm also an unreliable narrator. So don't take me at all my words here. But yeah, reading it again. So I had talked to a good friend of mine about Dead Man. I was not familiar with that character, and there's some honestly like hilarious and silly just puns he makes that John Constantine makes about Dead Man. And it almost could be potentially read as him talking to Batman as well. But yeah, I think something that I didn't understand reading it the first time, but there's a part where Batman is seemingly stabbed. We see him badly injured. He lays in like a pile of garbage, and then we see the frames of him falling off of a bridge, which timeline didn't make sense to me at all. And it gets into this very, I don't know, that one page that you brought up, Christian, that was one of my favorite images. Like, it's the full white hat top half of the screen, full black bottom of the screen, and it's all leading up to the fall. And I got this almost idea of like the fallen man, or like even the fallen angel, like this Lucifer type iconography that I never really thought about Batman. And Constantine mentions that, you know, at some point soon you'll be beyond redemption, and we don't know if he's really telling the truth there, but it comes back to him. So I'm jumping around in time a little bit, but after the fall, he goes down in the water. You see like ghost hands trying to hold him down in the depths, right? And he's going up and sees his parents.
Yep, almost like hands from hell reaching to pull him back down.
Exactly. So it's almost like he because of his parents, who he sees outside of the water, this emotional attachment to the world, he comes back. And then we find him back in that same location in the trash pile, and that's when he meets John Constantine. So at this point, I almost feel like we can't really trust what's happening from there, and John Constantine points him to the television to explain what's going on. And I feel like this really tied into at least my rereading of Dark Knight Returns, and how the TV is presented as this medium where maybe you're not getting the full story of what happened on the ground.
Yeah. So we also get these like crazy flashbacks. I'm looking at the comic right now as you're talking about it, Brian, in that sequence. We also get like this crazy flashback to young Bruce, and like this like ghoul character that's constantly reaching out to young Bruce.
Yes.
Throughout the whole comic. I don't know. Did you guys pinpoint who that character is? I wasn't able to.
See, it really reminded me of the character from Suicide Squad. I'm blanking on her name.
Enchantress.
Enchantress. Yeah. It looked like a younger version of her potentially. I haven't confirmed that online or anything.
That's possible.
But I did really like how it's kind of flipping Bruce's parents as being good people. You know, like I think we're always presented with them as these, like, you know, he looks back on them super fondly, and maybe this is him like having this realization that like, oh, my father maybe was cheating on my mother. They kind of fought, and maybe Batman is this this aspect of him that he used to hide from the reality of his childhood.
Right. I thought it was, you know, when that first page comes across, when he's talking about, I think he calls her Chicky or something like that. Like he's talking to this girl, and you're like, is that his dad? Like, he's talking to like his dad, but like Bruce Wayne's dad didn't do this. Bruce Wayne's dad is just trying to take his wife out to a theater show about
he's a good man. He's not a scummy.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, but that could be a lie. You know, that could be stuff to poison his mind as well.
Right.
You know, we don't know because we don't know the reality of anything. We got John Constantine narrating this. And I think it parallels him going. It's from John Constantine's narrating, but is it from Batman's like lucid state? You know, all these and John Constantine's talking to Batman as Batman's just like hallucinating all these memories, and they're kind of like he's like John Constantine's trying to tell him what's going on, because I mean, isn't it pretty clear that he's talking to Batman the entire time?
It definitely seems as though it's from Batman's perspective. But Batman isn't narrating. John Constantine is.
I know he's narrating. What I'm saying is John Constantine is talking to Batman.
Yes, I think so.
And so...
Oh, see, I didn't read it that way, actually.
How'd you read it?
So I think they talk to each other at points, but there's a difference in the dialogue. So you have the narration dialogue, and the first time, we see John Constantine talk to him is when he mistakes him for Alfred. And he says, no, he took the night off, it's just like a silly pun. So we have the narration side of him, and then we have that. And then we have a cut to Batman waking up, and Constantine's narration leads into him saying, you need a friend. And that's like the physical John Constantine talking to him. So I think there is this like two parts of John Constantine that only Batman is interacting with the, I think it's like the white background text bubbles where the other stuff is kind of integrated in the frames.
So that being said, we might not know who John Constantine is actually talking to yet.
Possibly. I think it was just easy.
Isn't he talking to us?
Maybe he is. Maybe he is. You're right. Maybe he is just talking to the reader.
Well, what's our history with any of you guys read Constantine? I know that brilliant movie with Keanu Reeves came out, and I've always been interested in that character. I know he had his own show. They had a TV run of John Constantine. We have the movie, and of course the comic books. He's always intrigued me. I had written something in high school, and I thought it was really clever. And when I met a mutual friend of me and Chris's, Nick Hishma, who is like the guru of comic books, he knows so much about them. He had told me that character existed, this character that I'd wrote in high school as John Constantine. So I've always been interested at that story. But historically, what is John Constantine's like? He's like you were saying, Chris. He communicates with the living and the dead, and he's kind of explain. He interacts with them.
I mean, I haven't read as much Constantine as Batman, but Brian, do you have more of a background?
Ooh.
No, he essentially he's a demon hunter. I would suppose like he everything that he's in is super paranormal based.
Right.
Like he kills demons. He's a member of Justice League Dark, which is made up of like Zatanna and Deadman and all these paranormal type of characters. So he's very heavily based in the paranormal.
Okay,
basically.
And
that's about as much as I know.
He was introduced originally and created by Alan Moore in his Swamp Thing run,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm remembering correctly, which obviously is a supernatural paranormal story as well.
And we've talked about haven't we talked about Alan Moore like talking to John Constantine or something?
Well, yeah, you guys should look this up online because I would never want to put words in his mouth because I feel one of the he writes some of the best literature of this generation in my opinion, and I include comics and literature just to make that clear. But yeah, there is multiple. Yeah, sure, I think so. They're still kind of on the fringe, but the movies have helped bring them out of that maybe. But yeah, there's two stories apparently of Alan Moore seeing John Constantine in his waking life. And I don't think he interacted with him because he was kind of just like freaked out by it. He was at the other end of the bar and he's like, yeah, I'm not going over there. I don't want to talk to this guy right now. But yeah, Alan Moore is definitely on a certain level of awareness, or that's one word for it at least.
Yeah. That's a good way to phrase it.
Okay, so Brian, still going through the plot. So he's having flashbacks as he's narrating. He's having flashbacks to childhood, and we see an unknown ghoulish woman kind of interacting with him as a child. He's injured, and then we get this scene with the people in the streets and a young lady in a hat, and apparently Demon Man, Dark Boy,
Dead Man. Dead Man
5. He's dead, man. But yeah, so throughout the comic, we have Wayne doing flashbacks, which honestly are pretty freaky to me. Like there's one where he's swinging around on a what are those things called? Where you can spin them with your leg on the swing set. But,
oh my gosh, I haven't been a child in a long time.
I know I'm blanking. I used to know this word.
Platform.
He's spinning on a rotary platform.
It's not a merry-go-round. What is it? You look
Carousel?
Like idiots now. No. Anyway,
we'll punch it in later or something.
Yeah.
But
a kitty spinny fidget widger.
Right, and we see the Wayne family sitting having a picnic, but Bruce Wayne's father is basically checking out another woman, and his wife is giving him this like evil, like angry look, like come on, really? And he notices, but then kind of gets taken away from it, and we see these basically these blurred images of the people around him, and this is something I feel like everyone looks like a zombie in this comic. It's almost like Constantine in particular. I'm like, this guy does not look like a living person as I see people normally, and he does make multiple. I'm really straying off the plot here, but he almost makes references to this being a hell of sorts, and I'm not sure about the implications of all of that, but yeah, so. We have Batman flashing back to his childhood, and he sees on TV, John Constantine tells him that the television's going to tell him a story, and the news is telling him that 2 bodies were found. Well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. So it was that a body was found, and we see that the Joker has been killed. And Batman remembers, oh, I was on that bridge tonight. And I don't know. What did you guys? I don't want to just be the one figuring this thing out. I'm interested in what you guys felt at this point in the comic, because I was very confused when I got there personally.
Oh, I was the same way. I mean, like I said, I've teetered back and forth between whether Batman is alive or dead. That's why I'm so excited for issue 2. I think it'll add a little more clarity. This is only a 3-issue run, by the way. So issue 2 will add a little more clarity as to what's going on. But it's tough to say. I'm on the fence.
Okay. And so after this point, basically, Batman hears the news the Joker's been killed, and immediately, being the detective that he is, flees to figure out what's going on. And he goes to find Gordon being kind of, I don't think he's interviewing this guy. I think it's presumed to be a homeless man who is telling him, this monster fell out of the sky and killed this guy. It's murder. Why aren't you guys doing anything about it?
Which kind of sounds like Batman killed the Joker.
This
like a giant bat killed
seems to be because he calls it, he ends up calling it was the devil falling out of the sky. But if you didn't know who Batman was, it's like, this kind of makes sense, especially considering the fall imagery that we saw
the panel
earlier.
Before, as Batman's going to interrogate him, one of my favorite panels in the entire one is the one of Batman leaping with kind of the gargoyles in the back. I mean, this one, I don't know what page it is. Let me see if I get a page. 22 of 53.
And then, when he does the dive down, and it looks like he's the spit coming out of the head of the
there's
building.
A lot of parallel imagery
incredible. I apologize for swearing.
Which
pretty cool.
Which makes me think that there is a sense of him hallucinating, because it's kind of, these memories are identical. There's him reaching out with his hand, and then it's Bruce reaching out with his hand as he's like dying and stuff. So I think the idea, to me, it really does seem like it's Bruce Wayne remembering what happened and stuff.
I wonder, and this is just me speculating, because I'm like I said, I'm looking over the comic as we're talking about it. I wonder if it's kind of like a Jacob's Ladder type of thing. Have you guys seen that movie where these are kind of like his fleeting moments, like he's experiencing a huge amount of time in seconds before his death, right? So that's why you have these weird hallucinatory images mixed in with like how he typically experiences life, and he's kind of jumping back and forth between past and present. I'm interested to see where this thing goes, but maybe that's what's happening. Who knows?
So
Brian Azzarello
spot on.
Hopefully. I was really hoping, I was coming in here really hoping you guys would tell me what the hell this thing was about, because I didn't get a chance to read through it again, but I imagine I'll read this thing like 3 times. And maybe we can have an update episode. But okay, so we have him going down to interrogate a homeless man. He says, "Oh, there's like this demon that came in the night," and Batman's kind of questioning. Brian, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah. So Batman, it's Gordon makes a couple of like kind of silly jokes. He's like, the homeless man's like, "I saw murder. Why don't you believe me?" And he says, "Because I believe in him." And that's when Batman shows up and starts chasing him down. And he says Godspeed as he leaves. And John Constantine's like, who knew that Gordon had so it's almost this contrast of Batman and God. And just a throwback to an earlier line. I think Constantine, while narrating at some point, he's like, to hell with that guy from Krypton or something like that. So it's almost like, forget Superman. This is Batman's world now.
Yeah.
So Batman's chasing him down,
and obviously you have the narration by Constantine, and then there's a line that says, God is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's like, what does he say? He says something about
He says, evil
the devil
is...
knows something that the angels have forgotten.
Let's see the whole thing. Just going from the page before. Evil, it's real, and it coils wind around every heart that beats. The devil, he admits what the angels won't. God is insane.
God is insane. That's a great line.
And he makes a funny pun about, like, you could almost understand it, given the state of things, how creation itself would make one bats or something like that. And it's almost like, so is Batman God? What is Batman? And so he's trying to get to the heart of this mystery. He's chasing this homeless man down. And I think it's interesting how when the guy hops over a fence, it almost looks like it could be Batman that he's chasing. There's a shot of just the guy's like coat coming up above the fence.
Ooh,
and
yeah,
then,
I see that.
Yeah, and so he jumps over, and then you see like a face in the mist. And then there's a speech bubble, which may be the Enchantress character who's talking to him. So it's almost like this. It's like, was this guy actually there? Obviously, this is a super subjective comic up to this point.
Yeah. Dude, I love that panel with the face in the mist, because you don't know who it is. It kind of looks like Dead Man a little bit, but then again, like you just said, is it that Enchantress? Like, what is that? And then immediately, I love that it cuts right back to him going to the Batcave.
Right, and that's when
he's trying to figure out why he's healed.
Right, he's like, where are the stab wounds? I remember being stabbed.
Yeah.
And then
this is also the most controversial.
Here we go.
This whole fucking comic. God.
This is what we all came here for, guys.
This episode will have to be marked explicit. Sorry, Christian.
This is Bat Wang.
But so in this panel, and this is kind of like the scandal that I wanted to talk about with you guys. When the issue first came out, you could see Batman's penis, or Bruce Wayne's penis, in this last panel. And that is actually why this comic is going for so much on eBay, because after the controversy, DC said that they weren't going to release a second printing with that panel. They were going to edit it. And on all the digital versions of this panel, it's actually already been edited out. I don't know what yours looks like, Brian, but that's what mine looks like.
Wow. That's
why that first printing is going for like $85 on eBay.
My shot is they just darkened it.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't see it on the digital version. And that's why the comic's so expensive, because it's never going to happen again. But
did you see an image? I didn't catch this the first time through reading it.
I remember you telling me that we were going to see some Wayne pee-pee. And so when it came to this shot, I was like, oh, this is clearly where you would have seen his Johnson. His
when
Wayne
I was
Manor.
reading it, I was like, because I was looking for it too, because I knew that going into the comic, and I was like, where is it? It's not here. So then I did some research.
Bat dong? Wait, so
and I mean, honestly, it doesn't
add
or take away anything from the story of this comic.
No.
If you look back, like in Watchmen, we got to see Dr. Manhattan's penis like throughout the whole thing. Right? It's not like nudity is just something that's not a big deal, right?
Well, apparently it is, because they took it from all the comics, and I imagine it kind of explains why it was hard for me to find on the DC site, probably. Yeah. But I mean, to be perfectly honest, like with the tone of this comic already, what Black Label is trying to go for, being more mature and adult and out there, like, what is it so strange to see a man's penis? I definitely think you wouldn't have this uproar if it was a pair of tits. You know, it's the kind of thing.
I don't know.
It's society. I really think they could have. There's tits in comics, right?
There are. Times are changing, though. So I mean,
it's so weird that you'd have all this like dark.
Brian's
stuff.
just looking at us like, I can't believe you guys are talking about this right now.
No, I think it's relevant, especially to what you guys what we talked about earlier with some of the homoerotic undertones that had to be countered out, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the earlier versions of Batman. So this is, I think, male frontal nudity is something that society is still not comfortable with, and something like in comedies, like Forgetting Sarah Marshall was very radical in that it showed the character multiple times. You know,
Jason Segel's just all out there for everybody.
But it was still played for laughs. Like, it's hard that, like, this is which I think has happened quite a bit. And I think it's really hard. It's like Watchmen got so much crap because it was like, man, that movie was long, and so was Dr. Manhattan's dong.
Well, it was also just flopping around the entire time. It's like, we really have to do this.
So in the comic, it's not as like your eye doesn't immediately go to it, but when it's on a giant movie screen, you're like, oh,
It's
wow,
hard to
okay,
ignore.
well,
Yeah, but it still is kind of like, I remember...
this is very faithful to the comic book.
I remember watching... in the last season of Westworld, there's a shot where a man gets naked and his little pee-pee, and I think they were trying to do that more in Westworld because they got so much garbage for so much female frontal nudity, and so they were like, yeah, we can show penises too, but it's still kind of this inert, like, if you're watching something serious and then just, penises are just they're funny. They're funny looking things. Penises don't look good. Right?
Well, I mean, that's coming from a straight man, so it's.
I don't know.
I'm sure females feel differently. Like there's like the show that the Wachowskis did on Netflix that I guess it got canceled, but I think they wrapped it up in some mini. What were they? Mini specials or something? I'm totally blanking on the name. The Sense8. I don't know if you guys watched that one at all. But that one definitely had a decent amount of nudity, male and female. And I feel like it's still, even watching it, felt like kind of revolutionary how open they were about it and how they played it straight, not for comedy at all.
Well, it's totally
so
an American,
I think we're getting
it's an American thing. I mean, because, like, that's one of the things, if
Without
you
a
watch,
doubt.
like, French films and stuff, I know they've been cool with the pee-pee for a while. It's a sign that I'm calling it the pee-pee. I can't say penis. I will laugh if I say penis. And you're laughing. And
I was noticing that. I was like, why does he keep saying the pee-pee? I don't understand.
The wanker. But I think I don't think it's just
Christian.
a male thing. I've been with several female partners that, they when they see a penis, they laugh, when it's like a flaccid penis.
It's definitely an American mentality.
And
like
I don't
you
know
said.
why that's become like the funniest thing in the world. It's just like the word penis. And the fact that we're talking about this amazing comic book and Batman. And now we've talked for the last 10 minutes about penis because it's a controversy. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like, as you said, this first issue was amazing, but when you search this online, literally it's just people talking about this stupid panel. Like it's maybe 3 or 4 panels in the whole comic book, and that's what everybody's focusing on. So
You
anyway,
think it's the artist calling up and being like, it's someone calling the artist and be like, I told you we shouldn't have put Wayne Dick in there.
people are joking that it's his Dick Grayson.
It's an easy.
It's
those jokes are
fruit.
low hanging fruit.
Low hanging fruit. It's kind of like Bruce Wayne's balls. I'm sorry, that was another. Okay,
we're going off the rails now.
Yes.
So this leads into him basically having what.
Brian, I had like 8 more dick puns. Right?
Hey, keep them coming. I'm just trying to bring us back on track.
Subscribe to our non-existent Patreon for all your dick puns. All right, continue going. Let's actually talk about the story here.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So it moves on to him basically having a hallucination where it seems like the bat suit itself is talking to him, and that's something that also is like, wow, okay, so this is almost Batman as something intrinsically separate from Bruce Wayne. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, what did you guys think of that moment? Did it play well for you?
Well, I mean, I think this is a common thing that they do a lot in Batman comics, and like I was speaking to earlier, there is a division between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Like Batman is its own separate identity, and I mean, it's not like he has multiple personality disorder or anything like that, but he's choosing to separate, right? Bruce Wayne is the real facade. Batman is his true identity. So there's been many times in comics imagery of like a bat or the bat suit or any type of Batman iconography kind of pulling Bruce Wayne back in. It's like, this is unescapable. You are me. Like, this is who you're destined to be, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it plays into the psychological thriller thing, because, I mean, even his, like, undead suit says, like, check your head. Like, It's like, you've got some shit going on right now, bud. You're seeing a talking bat suit grab you.
And so I didn't know the character of Deadman previously, but just the little that they do explain it about this disembodied thing that can hop between bodies, and us debating about whether Batman is alive or not. It's like is it completely unreasonable to think that Batman could be controlling Bruce Wayne in this way, or am I going a step too far there?
Maybe like metaphorically.
Okay. Oh yeah, so it's like an aspect of his psyche that he can't move past, or that he can't fully accept. So it's created this split thing within him.
Yeah, I think because of the narrative way that this is told, and the structure and the unreliableness of John Constantine, it is hard to like map out, why Deadman he's like in it, but like obviously they're setting it up so there's a conflict there between Deadman and Batman and maybe Constantine, and a reason because there's like no why in this story.
Bedman. Oh my God, that's a different thing. I combine Batman and Deadman.
Master Sleep.
Deadman is usually an aide. So I don't think they're on opposing sides. But I think because this is the first issue, we don't have
Deadman's
the full picture.
Good guy?
Yeah, Deadman's a superhero. He's a good guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He's not a villain.
Oh man, that changes things.
That throws me off completely.
Yeah, because it seems like in the next panel that we're going to talk about, he's possessing people and jumping from body to body.
Well, that's the only way he's able to communicate. He's like a spectral character, so he can only communicate with people on the physical plane by possessing people. It's not like he's doing it maliciously. It's the only way he can communicate with people other than, say, John Constantine, who could communicate on both planes.
Okay.
So he's trying to tell Batman something, but because his possession has a time limit to it, he's not able to talk to him.
Oh, this is really bad. This is really bad. So in the next one, it's Bruce Wayne in the crowd of people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
Where he's pretending to be a homeless person.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That changes things. Because I thought it was the homeless guy I thought it was a flashback to the homeless guy from before.
No. That's explained. Because in the panels before that, when he's like having a panic attack, he has the hat and the beard. He has the disguise that he's about to put on to go out and gather information.
Yeah, I see that now. I didn't see that before. And also, he looks a little like the homeless guy from before.
He does. He does.
Let me look at how this is. Continue on while I'm looking at this.
So okay. So you feel like Deadman, separate from his history, you think he was trying to help him here? Because I felt like there was an antagonistic level to it, and maybe it was just the way his character's written. It could always be like that, but it almost kind of felt like he was this like hippie making fun of that whole thing. He's like, there's an evil group after you, man, or something like that.
No. Like... He's trying to tell him.
Okay, so he's being genuine. All right, I didn't know how to read that.
Yeah, I mean that's how I read it personally. But again, I have like extra context and history with Deadman. So yeah, I read it as him trying to tell Bruce something important, but not being able to, and then he possesses the dog, and then the dog runs off. So Bruce doesn't get all the information that he needs.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, I wish I had more context. I got to do some reading after this, obviously.
We'll have to read it a third time.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, that as well.
It is really hard to tell everybody's motivations, and I certainly Deadman, and his trusty sidekick Sleepy the Greyhound. Yeah, it was really hard to tell, who's against him and when everything's happening and all that stuff. But this leads us into kind of what's going on with the card trick.
Right.
That's happening in the background, and that's distracting. Is she fighting Deadman there, or like warding him off because he seems like eager to get away?
So when I was reading this, and I first saw this character, I almost thought she was Zatanna, which I wouldn't be surprised if she turns out to be Zatanna in another issue. She's like
has an outfit.
Yeah,
she kind of has like a color coordinated little.
Zatanna typically has a top hat and like kind of like a magician's getup, like a tuxedo magician's getup. She's like a sorceress. She does magic, right? So I wouldn't be surprised to see Zatanna in a Constantine comic book. I just don't think we've been introduced to who this person is if she ends up showing up in another issue. But I mean, she does. I'm looking over it here. We're going to have to edit this out.
No worries.
He says, yeah, looking for a buddy of mine. Probably been there more than once. Worried about I'm going to find him. Wearing green. He's pale, sick. And then she's like, crazy. And then she holds up the Joker card. She's like,
Yeah.
This your friend? So I feel like there's more to this woman than we've been able to see yet.
Yeah. And he
So
also,
we'll find out.
Batman is potentially, it's like it could be that he was hanging out there on purpose because it seems like he may be in on her hustle, for lack of a better term. She's doing like some card tricks, and he tells them where the card they're looking for is, and they all inherently trust him for some reason. And then she's just kind of like, well, was he trying to help you or not? So I was definitely confused.
I think that's all coincidental. He's not in on her hustle. I think he's trying to get her away from the other people in the street to gather some information because he's trying to figure out where the Joker is at this point because his body, didn't they say earlier in the comic his body disappeared? Like they don't know where the Joker's body is at this point.
Well, see, I think there was 2 bodies and one of them disappeared.
Oh man.
I know.
Yeah.
Needless to say, there's a lot to digest in this comic book.
Yeah, which I think is really cool. So moving on, we go into where Constantine's saying, hey, the dead, Bruce Wayne is in his manor, and you got some bird imagery kind of going in between. I really like the way this transitions from scene to scene because it kind of takes, especially the way that I was reading it, because it immediately turns into the next image, which is all paralleled as he's going through. And it's kind of this, it goes from him kind of in his manor, some really cool shot there of him trying to figure stuff out, and then goes into Bruce Wayne trying to sleep, little young Bruce Wayne, which I think is cool. And there's the line, only the dead don't sleep. So, constantly flashing in between those things. So, are you dead? Because you can't sleep. Here's 2 points in your life that are not in the same time, and there are times when Bruce cannot sleep.
Right.
And kind of this child is a good, if this all is kind of in his head, the child is a good way to separate, those 3 parts of the human psyche as like the id, the ego, and the right.
Mm-hmm.
I love
definitely
that.
agree.
Yeah, for sure.
You, Brian, you're more intelligent than me, and Chris, you're a philosophical major. What are the, young Bruce Wayne is what? That would be like the. You need to save me from here. You need to save me from this. But what's the one that would?
So I guess I'm not super deep into Freud, who I believe is the one who came up with these terms.
Neither am I.
But if I had to just off the top of my head make a guess, I would think, because I know the id is kind of like the pure emotional drive. So I'd say that's
okay.
Kind of like the darkness, like this monster inside of us.
So it could probably be Batman himself. But with that being said, the superego, the thing that transcends, that would also probably be closer to Batman than I'm not sure where Bruce Wayne would fall into. I think it would be
okay. So judging from my Wikipedia, id is the disorganized part of the personality structure that has basic human instincts and drives, which to me would be like childlike. And then the ego would be his would be Bruce Wayne, and then the superego would be Batman.
That makes sense.
And we kind of get these 3 characters, so cool. I'm going to edit all this other fumbling out and just go straight to that. No.
That is a great idea.
Please do, yeah.
No, but I believe if you're looking at all these 3 characters, you have the id, the ego, and the superego, and I think it'd be easy to look at the childlike Wayne as the id, Bruce Wayne as the ego, and then Batman as the superego, as the one who transcends that. Reality, kind of basic human instinct, and then our actualized version of ourselves, kind of fighting against each other and fighting memories.
I can dig it.
Which may be what they're going for in this. So now we get to the, after going through that and him interacting with the Ghoul and all sorts of things. Like, it's so hard to pinpoint because it's like, it seems like it's jumping around like a madman and like exactly what it's trying to accomplish. But you get some bat imagery, like a physical bat. with her presenting that to him.
They make some kind of deal, it seems like, at this point. She holds it up to his chest and asks for his tears, which apparently are very valuable.
Oh, good old Wayne tears. Those are almost as expensive as one of these comics.
Tears.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder: are they rewriting the origin story here? Like, are they going to make a whole new Batman narrative out of this, even in the short run, but just kind of change the rules? So, is this actually something that happened, or is this just again like imagery and kind of breaking?
Hashtag more to come.
Hashtag.
Oh yes, be excited.
Mo to come. And then we go into kind of the last scene, which is like so badass, and it's Batman opening up the cathedral doors. And you get the shot of him walking up to John Constantine, and he's like, "Hey, man," which is great. It's just gonna be like to me, I'm reading it and going, he's just kind of like, "Can we stop doing this?
I'm done playing games
this
here.
Is awful. Like, tell me what's going on." And then we get the awesome, like one of the coolest pieces of imagery I've ever seen, which is Jesus Christ with Joker makeup on, with ha
written all over.
Yeah, I never thought I wanted to see, since Jared Leto's Joker, I never thought I wanted to see someone with ha written all over them, in like the Joker thing. But this totally works, and it's the iconography of Jesus Christ on the cross with Joker
and
makeup.
This image alone is precisely why they're doing this under a separate label, the black label.
Yeah,
this is not something you could have
controversial
in a standard DC comic. DC would literally be crucified.
Oh yeah,
buzzinger.
Yeah.
I love the build up too. I'm not sure. I think it might be Constantine talking as the narrator, but he says something about like, I don't know if you believe in the afterlife, but it's kind of a moot point because it believes in you.
Yeah,
right.
And I just thought that like perfectly like sums up like what the hell is happening here.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, yeah, you don't have to believe that this is really happening because the things that are making it happen.
We're watching it happen.
Yeah, which kind of I think maybe trying to like concrete the story also in a way of saying like, no, like this isn't just in his head. Like we're dealing with the spiritual realm, and this actually is happening.
Yeah.
And I think again to the strength of this format of storytelling is that you can do things like this because Jacob Ladder. We talked about Jacob's Ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm thinking of Brian's bladder because of how long we're going. But in Jacob's Ladder. He's like, I do. Talking about Brian's bladder is our timer for our episodes. That movie's good, but it's so jarring to see kind of people dealing with spiritual realms in different places, and especially for the time that was made. It's so hard to get across, but I think it works well. It doesn't make it easier to understand the story, especially when it's just one issue. But it certainly works better in a way to really absorb the information of what's on the page. So what do we think this means? We've got the shot of Jesus Christ with Joker makeup. So Jesus, as you know, our Lord and Savior. So Jesus is a God-human mix. That's what he represents, and you've got him painted in Joker makeup, meaning to say that maybe the Joker isn't gone and hasn't played his last joke.
I think he's coming back.
And what is this like? Is Joker embodying like the Godhead? Like is he saying now the Joker's in the afterlife and now shit gets really real when he joins amongst the ranks of like what Constantine normally deals with and devils and angels and stuff? Is that what we're gonna see? Are we gonna see? Pardon my French. Fucking like devil Joker. Like
I mean, it's a possibility.
I would stray far from what's possible with what they've done so far. Because Constantine's in it, which means that Gabriel and God and Lucifer all exist in this universe now. Like this is Constantine, to all the knowledge I have from seeing the movie and knowing the character, he lives in the biblical universe, and it's as if angels and demons do exist and are from different dimensions and interact with humans. And Constantine's unique in that he can interact with these spiritual beings. So I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that we are looking at lots of supernatural stuff, incorporating Batman lore with the supernatural.
Yep, and honestly, that's what we were promised leading up to this and all the advertising. Like they really pushed that paranormal aspect of this comic, so that's what I kind of expected going into it. Needless to say, I'm really excited for the next 2 issues, and I definitely think we should have like another episode, or maybe in our quick hits, we talk about what ended up happening at the end.
Which is so weird that we decided to do this with so much like knowledge of like, you know, looking online. I didn't want to spoil it too much. I really wanted a fresh perspective. I wanted to be honest with our listeners about how clueless I am about what's going on in this. And hopefully we get better as we go along at helping digest things. But I really didn't want to be tainted by other people's opinions on what happened. I didn't want an easy answer. I want to discover this with you guys. But I think it will be easier to digest wholly in the context of all 3 issues that come out and having that. And we should definitely have a follow-up episode. I'm totally down for that.
So that being said, how do you guys feel about the Black Label?
Well, I mean, if this is the kind of stories they're going to tell, yeah, it's exciting. Brian?
You're on board?
No, I'm all in as well. Definitely about it. Yeah.
I mean, I like to see if they're setting up a lot of really cool stuff. And like I said, this is like an intro to a movie, almost like a really badass intro. So there is some follow-up that, you know, needs to be executed upon. And if it keeps staying as vague as it is and really can't come to it stays pretty like open, and it can't really be dissected very easily, I think that will hurt it. So I do think it needs to either, I mean, what would be the following ways they could do this are they do it from another person's perspective narrating, and we see a different side or something go along the same, or like the Joker's recount of the event, which if that parallels and intertwines, and it's Joker's backstory
really
in
cool.
his childhood. And dude, what if, oh god, this is just the thought, what if Joker's backstory is of like a happy life and of things going completely right, and you draw parallels of like people in like they're experiencing each other's suffering? I think that would be, I don't know, that's just like,
that'd be cool. That'd be crazy.
I think that's a really cool angle they could take. And then the Joker at the end of his road sees Batman as the devil. You do things like that. That would be really cool. So that's a way they could do it, and it could just be like kind of a character dissection of these characters in the supernatural realm, which would be cool. Or they continue with the story, and it's still Constantine narrating it, or Constantine finally is like, okay, here's the jig. Here's what's happening, man. You're fucking dying.
Giving it to you straight.
Giving it to you straight. Or am I? So yeah, it would be really cool. Brian, what are your thoughts on the? I know we kind of glossed over a lot. What are your thoughts on this Jesus imagery with the Joker?
No, it kind of completely threw me off the first time through, and now that you guys have talked it out a little bit, yeah, I think there's definitely this thing about maybe these characters becoming more archetypal and less grounded in reality as they have been previously. Because if, like we were saying earlier, we don't know if Batman died. If he did, he is back from the dead. And if Joker is on the same level where he has died and comes back, then they become something transcendent in a way that who knows where things can go from there. And obviously, like you've said, Constantine brings in this idea of angels and demons that can get involved. I don't know about the magician character too much. I guess she was in his standalone stuff, but I am super excited to see where it goes. This is right up my alley in terms of what I'm interested in entertainment-wise. So I'm just hyped for it.
Sweet. I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because comic books, and this is something we'll hit on a lot as we get more into a lot of this stuff, comic books and stories and ideas of myth. But it is always so interesting. My name is Christian, so obviously it doesn't take a rocket science to understand that my parents' background and beliefs and what I grew up in. And looking at the stories of old, whether you're looking at Christianity, which is very obviously popular in the West, or Hinduism, or Shintoism especially, right? You get all these grand mythical stories, and that's what superheroes really are for us. That's like the last century of this made-up stuff. I mean, it's like very clear that like we know who wrote it, and they wrote it to sell pages of comic books, right? But we've become so invested through different mediums in these characters. And so it's really cool when you transcend them to the level of myth, and to combine them is always a cool thing, but the execution is always really, really tough. And it's always touchy, right? Because you're dealing with shit people actually believe in and care about, and there's plenty of people that I know on a very deep level that really care about these things. And when you kind of mess with them and meld them, you're in really dicey territory. But it's always juicy to like bring in what the myths of old with the myths of new, which a lot of people try to do to mixed effect. Obviously, the Constantine movie like left some to be desired. But the idea, and Supernatural is also a running television show that's very popular.
Yeah, I can't believe that's still on the air.
That's a Monster of the Week type movie, TV show, excuse me, that deals with supernatural. But I think it's really cool to paint superheroes. It's always interesting to paint them in the light of mythical heroes and what that tells us about. Because ultimately what we are doing when we write these and read these is seeking like truth and understanding about the human condition at the end of the day. I mean, it's cool to watch Batman punch Joker in the face and to watch all the antics, but at the end of the day, it really is, what is it about ourselves can we learn from these heroes, and how can we see ourselves in their struggle? And so to bring that on a larger, grandiose scale of supernatural and death and is really interesting. And like Brian was saying, right up all of our alleys. Right up our alleys, and in between our legs, where our Batman dingleberries lay.
Couldn't even let it die.
He
couldn't even do it.
Had to come back to it.
Sorry.
All right.
So anyway, this is our longest podcast we've ever had, and I think
by far.
I think because we really wanted to get into this and we were really excited about it. We should have a follow-up, and we're really excited that you listened. We know we went long, so we try to keep these in the hour and a half range. I think we're at 2.5 hours, so about an hour longer. So
thanks for hanging in.
Thanks for hanging in. If you hang in, any feedback, if anybody has any interesting history with Batman, the character, Constantine, if you've read Damn, what do you think about it? We have a Facebook page now. Is that live, Chris?
It should be live this coming week.
Sure. So check it as Pop-O-Holics. Just search that on Facebook. It should pop up. So follow us there. We're going to start some community posts and polls, which is going to be really exciting.
Also have a Facebook group, Pop-O-Holics podcast is what it's called. So
yeah, so join us there. And as always, you can send your feedback to popoholicscast@gmail.com. Really excited to hear from you guys there. What you think about the show, what we could do better, your favorite Batman stories, what you thought about this comic. Those are all great outlets to do that. Anything else, boys?
I think that's it. We did it.
Wunderbar. Well, this has been really awesome, guys. I'm going to read this comic probably 3 more times this next week, and I might, our next show, I might come back and just be like, I was totally wrong. Okay, I figured it out. I got it. Cool. And then we are going to be coming at you guys next week with, is that our Chris Nolan episode?
It is, yeah, our Chris Nolan spotlight.
So tight. So we're going to be talking about good old Chris Nolan and all of his films, some of which we talked about today, and we'll talk about all that and more, and it's very excited to do that with you guys. Cool. All right, guys. Signing off. Bon appetit.
Have a great week.
Still can't land.
Consume consciously.
Consume consciously. Bon appetit.
Have a great week.
Make podcasts great again. I mean, shit.
Edit that out.
Edit point.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Pop-O-Holics. As always, you can send your questions, comments, and concerns and feedback to popoholicscast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. We're also going to be opening up a new Facebook group where we're going to have open polls and discussions. So come join the community on Facebook. And please remember, rate and review us on iTunes. It really helps get our show out there. We're also going to be launching on Stitcher, Spotify, and other podcast streaming services very soon, so you can invite all your friends to listen along. Thanks again, and have a great day.